Good morning and welcome to the Monday, April 25th, 2022, 9 o'clock strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present, our executive management team. And we are going to start with Tori this morning.
Good morning. So what I am looking to do is an interlocal agreement with Benton Franklin County Juvenile Court. Across the states, the juvenile courts support each other a lot. You all know we work very closely together. We have a master instructor trained through the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission. They, along with several other courts across the state, are struggling to keep their staff, period, and get them trained because the Criminal Justice Training Commission kind of keeps the juvenile court at a low priority. So we have a master instructor on site. So what I'm looking to do is loan him to Benton Franklin County Juvenile Court to train some of their corrections officers. So we have all the paperwork, and Steve Bartell has looked at it. Matt Cozen Legal has looked at it and gave all their input. Benton Franklin's ready to go. When loan was the key word. So to not have them compensate Tony or reimburse. It's something that's fairly common practice. We actually have somebody coming from the other side of the state here in a month to train our staff on one of our evidence-based practices so we can continue serving kids.
How long was that for?
Tony going over there 4 days. They will pay for his travel and food, etc. It's just loaning his expertise.
We're going to leave you shorthanded for those 4 days.
Our detention manager will be there on staff, so we're almost fully staffed now, and he does not work the floor, so it's more administrative stuff that can be handled for 4 days. Live like a vacation. Handle that.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, no, it sounds like you've got it handled, and
Okay.
it's just for a short few days. So
Right.
I wasn't sure if it was longer than that or not. So
I probably couldn't do that.
yeah. Very good.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You guys have a good week.
Okay. Doug,
Good morning.
good morning.
I think our first item is to follow up on a level of service question Commissioner French brought up last week. And if I'm not mistaken, Scott Chesney should be with us. There he is. And we had a great meeting with Scott this last week. And I think he is going to help speak to the level of service requirements related to parks.
Oh, certainly. Happy to. Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair. The question was, can we use this conservation land to help on our settlement levels of service issue? And the answer specifically is no. And the reason is that in the settlement agreement, it talks about having to have community parks, which are essentially improved parks. And so we have to use that standard to work toward our level of service for the unincorporated UGAs. Now, that said, this does have an advantage that we didn't have before, which is the rural areas where there is no LOS set, but yet we have to now add an LOS due to our creating our CFP, updating our CFP, which again, in turn, gets back to the settlement agreement. We can use acreages in conservation futures lands to help create and set that LOS for the rural areas. So while it doesn't help one side, it definitely helps the other side. So it's a good attribute for us. And in setting that LOS, since it's in a rural area, the ownership of that makes no difference whatsoever. So happy to take any questions on that specific one.
So based upon that, then how much are we short from meeting our LOS in the existing comp plan?
We don't have that quite yet. Right now, our GIS team is working out a graphic description of lands that are developed within a boundary from an existing park. And with that, we have to calculate the population within that and then come back to the standard of LOS per 1,000. And it's complicated, as Jessica mentioned before, because you have to deduct like the first 7,000 if it's more or less than that. So we're working on that calculation. But now that we've got clarity on it, we should be able to, we'll be pulling that together in the next week or so.
How about waterways?
Again, if the only thing that matters for the settlement agreement LOS is something that we could demonstrate is an improved park. So that would mean it would have to have something like ball fields or restrooms or play apparatus or something that that fits in more of a definition of what Paul and Doug have in their world. Unimproved areas can help us in that rural level of service immensely, but not in the UGA side itself.
But if you have a lake with a boat launch?
Good question. I don't know that perhaps it may be sort of moot in the sense that I don't know that we've got any recreational lakes within the UGAs as they exist now. But for that rural level of service, we have great latitude in terms of what we categorize and what we use to define that LOS.
But Liberty Lake?
Good question.
2 for 2.
I think the challenge is whether or not it would be declared a park by our Parks Department, and if they had any facilities in that they built and or maintained or operated. I think it's probably the benchmark we would have to use for the UGA LOS.
So they do, and now they even rent out cabins out there and stuff, as well as park area. And correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, Paul, I mean, isn't that accurate statement?
Yeah, we have a very large regional park out there. What I don't know that it's within the UGA. So if we're specific to the UGA, off the top of my head, I'm thinking our regional park may be just outside of the UGA in that area.
Nonetheless, we would certainly take a look at it, commissioners, and if we could find a way to get it, help that qualify, we would gladly do it.
How about Clarence Ferry then? Is that outside the UGA too?
I believe it's in the city of the Valley, but
well, it borders the city of Spokane Valley on 3 sides.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they have a UGA.
no, there's no UGA designation for the Plants Ferry Sports Complex, nor does the UGA encompass any or surround any part of Liberty Lake. There's only a small part of the UGA off the northwest corner of the lake.
Yeah, I know within our park plan, we certainly track that as improved acres and serving the immediate area.
Right, and those things will absolutely help us define a rural LOS. So that's where they will come into our advantage.
Yeah, but we're gonna get our lunch handed to us on the urban area though. And that's where we want to increase housing and everything else. I mean, we're not going to be able to move the ball unless we can either bring those inside the UGA, and that we're going to have an uphill battle on that. Or we're going to start making some investments inside the UGA and the urbanized areas.
Scott, do you have a nice detailed map that shows where the UGA is that you can send to us? I mean, all the ones I've seen have been so far out. It only shows main roads. You can't see any arterials or neighborhood. I mean, do you have a nice detailed map?
Absolutely, we can share that with you. Even right now, if you want to see one on the screen, but we can certainly print out something at a scale where you can see pretty much the detail of exactly where those boundaries are, and look at it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine if you just send it to us. I mean,
Okay.
that's fine. And then, I don't know, maybe then we can dive in and see exactly where that line is.
Well, and just if I may, just a point of clarification, the park itself does not have to be in the UGA. It's the residents within the UGA have to be within 3 miles of the park. So if those parks are like just outside of the UGA, but they're serving citizens that are inside of the UGA that are within 3 miles, 3 road miles of that park, then it does count. And that's what Scott and I have briefly met with our contractor last week, and we were looking at these 3-mile bubbles around these improved parks. And it actually looks like we may be in better shape than we thought with our LOSs. And that's the calculation that we're doing right now. So it may have been that we were a little too, that we might have done the calculation incorrectly, basically last time. So we might be in better shape than we were last time when we did the CFP. We just have to kind of wait and see what that mapping looks like.
So another question for you, Jessica, then, thank you for that clarity. If we were to partner with a jurisdiction where we made an investment in a park that they had, can we share credit for it?
Yes, ownership of the park doesn't matter. It just has to amount to what we've defined as a community park. And so it just says that the amenities have to be similar to a community park, e.g. irrigated turf, play fields, etc. But the ownership of that park does not matter.
Okay. So the ownership of the park could be a school district.
As long as it qualified as a community park.
Okay. Okay. All kinds of fun.
Any other questions on the level of service? Okay, then, Doug, and I
Okay.
guess I'll let you introduce the
Okay.
gentleman sitting next to you.
Great. Great. The gentleman next to me today is Kurt Chambers. Kurt is our Operations Division Manager and is doing a phenomenal job. Before that, he enjoyed being the superintendent of our Lake Tahoe Creek Golf Course. And so he has quite the background between a business degree and a turf agronomy degree. He is magical in operations, and we're enjoying his help there. And one of the things that the task of his lifetime, as I described it, no pressure at all. We've been working diligently on a long-term plan, or to put together a sustainable plan to help with our equipment out there. And we've had a couple, we've tried a lot of different things over the years, but we have a combined approach this time that involves acquisition of equipment in combination with leasing equipment, vehicles and mowers as a way to try to restart. And I don't want to take all his thunder, but we have we're hoping that there may be an opportunity to utilize some of the proceeds from the raceway to do great and amazing things that would help our entire park system in ways I can't begin to emphasize the importance. So with that, Kurt, I'll turn it over. We've got a great presentation and we're really excited to have this discussion.
All right, good morning. Thanks, Doug. So we're here to present the equipment and vehicle proposal. Next slide, please. Brief background of our existing vehicle fleet. We have 37 vehicles of an average age of 25 years old. The mowing and heavy equipment fleet consists of 35 pieces, again, averaging 25 years old. And for these 72 pieces, including a bunch of smaller power equipment, we have one single skilled mechanic to care for them. Next slide, please. It's just a brief picture of some of the vehicles we use on the regular to maintain level of service in our parks. Up to this point, the Parks Department, as Doug mentioned, has not had a scheduled replacement plan, rather based on special needs and catastrophic failure, but we feel we have an opportunity now financially to establish a plan moving forward. In June of 2021, in just a 3-week window, we faced several challenges. We had 9 vehicle failures. The average age of these vehicles was 20 years old. Over $13,000 in repairs, several weeks of downtime, and some vehicles were non-repairable because the parts are no longer available, either new or used. We also experienced 2 trailer failures. Both of those equipment trailers were loaded with equipment traveling to site, 15 years old. And as I said, they were on the road. The collisions were avoided, luckily, both times. And finally, in that 3-week window, we also experienced one of our daily use mowers went down. That mower is 21 years old. It needed a single part, and that piece exceeded $1,500, roughly 26 labor hours to replace. It was down for 2 months. The vehicle resale value on that piece of equipment is $1,000. So the repair costs far exceeded the value. Next slide, please. Here you will see a 5-year financial summary. As Doug spoke to, we would like to use a combination of lease, fair market value leases, as well as purchases, and utilizing the proceeds from the sale of the raceway of $1.453 million. That will carry us well into the 4th year of our 20-year plan, as we'll show later in the slide. It's not till year 4 that we would start finding other capital funds. Then from there forward, it'll be on us. Next slide. So we developed a multi-year sustainable replacement plan, utilizing the proceeds from the Raceway Park to cover a majority of the initial purchases and leases. We've also spoke to utilizing the operating budget for the fair market value mowing equipment and leases moving forward. 2 separate lease types. 100% of the mowing equipment needs to be addressed over time through a rolling 5-year lease purchase approach. We will purchase and retain the mowers for an additional 5 years following the lease, surplus and replace after 10 years. And just some background, mowing equipment is historically more likely to have higher repair costs, quick depreciation, and a shorter lifespan as compared to other heavy equipment. We anticipate a 2 lease cycle needed to resolve our current needs. We'd also plan to use a 5-year vehicle fleet lease with lease and purchase. Keep the vehicles for an additional 5 years following the lease, surplus and replace after a 10-year period. Over time, this approach to address approximately 75% of our vehicle fleet needs over 2 lease cycles. And then we will continue those cycles to sustain the vehicle and mowing equipment needs inevitably. And the final piece is our purchase plan. We've identified pieces of equipment for phased purchase to include 100% of highly specialized and upfit equipment, as long lifespan equipment, and the remaining 25% of the vehicle fleet that would not be leased. These items have a 10, 15, 20-year lifespan. Next slide. Some details on the leases. The vehicle fleet lease, we would utilize Enterprise Fleet Services. We trade in our existing old equipment to help offset the lease expense. Would initiate a new lease every 5 years with the goal to replace all non-specialized fleet vehicles by the second 5-year lease period. We purchase the vehicles at the end of the lease period and retain for additional 5 years for a total of 10-year retention. And these vehicles are daily users, getting people to and from the work sites. The mowing equipment lease, we would utilize Toro machinery through government contracts. The Toro mowing equipment, we would be selecting and suited for our county parks and landscape features as compared to our current fleet of mowers, which will make us far more efficient. We'll initiate a new lease every 5 years, with all expired mowers to be replaced by the second 5-year period, and then purchase at the end of each lease, retain for additional 5 years, for a total of 10-year retention, which is about the end of their cost-effective usable life for mowing equipment. So here's a picture of a 16-year estimated operating lease budget impact. So this would be 3 lease cycles. We're displaying both the equipment and the vehicles. The vehicles, the first 5 years, we're proposing 15 vehicles to be leased, and the mowers, first 5 years, 6 mowers. So our purchase strategy is to purchase a combination of specialty vehicles and equipment with 10, 15, and 20-year lifespan. And these are the vehicles that our most highly skilled employees, the trade specialists, use daily and year-round to maintain the park system and make all their necessary repairs. I've spelled out the first 5 years. Most importantly is our first year with 9 specialized regular and heavy-duty vehicles, a utility tractor, a turf sweeper, and 1 equipment trailer. That's the most cumbersome year, but the most necessary. We move on to the next slide. There's a picture of the 20-year estimated capital purchase financial summary. Outside of year 1, current year, we tried to keep the capital requirement to a manageable dollar amount while satisfying all our needs. We've also, in our plan, have shown that we will not be in the situation that we are now as we're phasing in 10, 15, 20-year lifespan equipment. And this can be shown on the next slide, please. So year 1 is the most cumbersome, but you can see I've used several different types. I've got 10, 15, 20-year equipment being phased in. And I tried to balance it while meeting the needs of our fleet over the next 20 years. So we're never left with 1 year that's going to be an exorbitant amount of capital funds needed. And as some of those slides alluded to, we anticipate there to be some annual cost savings resulting from the equipment replacement. We anticipate with new equipment, annual maintenance savings of $9,660. This is based on 12 vehicles averaging 4,600 miles. So it's a little conservative. We also anticipate there being some fuel savings with the updated vehicles, around $7,200. Our current fleet is averaging 10 miles per gallon, while a new fleet is going to average, this is large vehicles down to highway vehicles, 16 miles per gallon. And if we spread that out over 12 vehicles at $3.50 per gallon of fuel, that's coming out to be $7,245 for a total of $16,905, rounded up to $17,000 anticipated savings.
Are any of these vehicles either hybrids or all electric, or are they all gas?
So the SUVs for the administrative staff are hybrid. Everything else is gas and or diesel for towing. Yes. I feel as technology improves, we'll be looking at that, especially in the mowing, but we're just not there yet in today's motion.
Any mowers out there that can mow the large fields that we have without an extension cord?
Not yet.
Right.
So
Yes.
despite the legislature's attempt to get rid of them this last session.
Yeah, we're starting to see some of the smaller riding mowers in the residential market are starting to phase in, which is a good sign. And you know that's likely to be ahead, but it's just not there now.
Say within 10 years, Toro's working on quite a few mowers, but we're easily 10 years out at that point.
We let the legislature know about that.
We relate it, definitely.
Doug will make a call.
Doesn't make a call.
Made a few calls. We did in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wisdom will descend upon Olympia.
Yes. Yep.
Next slide, please. So Appendix A just kind of shows our vehicle fleet lease. What I'm requesting and what it looks like financially and types of vehicles. Over, there's 3 lease periods there, so that's a 15-year picture. And Appendix B is the same, but this is for a mowing equipment lease, the types of mower, the size. And that's for 3 lease cycles as well. And with that, is there any questions that I can help answer?
What's the average mileage on some of your on your current fleet? Because and I'll preface it with, when Doug took me on a tour when I first became a commissioner of some of the parks up in North County, I think we got in, but it was probably like a 2000 Ford Expedition, and it had like 52,000 miles on it. So I mean, this was like
So it's broken in.
this was like a 17-year-old car, and it only had like 50,000 miles on it.
I think that's the one at our admin office.
Yeah,
The ones in Kurt's world are very different than that. What
Okay.
would you say
So
your
the-
mileage?
The average is tough because probably 60% of our staff is seasonal. So the average miles on the vehicles is 4,600 miles. But we have 15 of us who are there year round. So our vehicles, the truck I drive is at 145,000 and it's a 2008. Our service trucks are over 200,000 and they're 21 years old.
Okay.
So it kind of the seasonal vehicles throw our average off.
Okay. In my spot, you'll find a 17-year-old F-150 with 214,000 miles on it. And I'm still driving it. I'll be driving it next week. I'll probably be driving it next year. Is there a level of care that could maybe be picked up amongst the staff? I mean, on these, I mean, I know you're not always driving them on paved roads, that they're not always driven, and I mean, I assume you take them off-road or on grass or down trails if needed, but I mean, is there a level of care that could maybe extend the life of some of these
So
vehicles?
our mechanic hits the regular maintenance ahead of schedule. Now, he's a 3,000 mile, but he'll be in those every 2,500. And with the use that the team, we're on and off trailers, we're loading, offloading tools and stuff into them. So the level of care is pretty high. It's just the type of use that they're getting, whether it's pulling a trailer with a 5,000, 6,000 pound piece of equipment, and then offloading, onloading. They are heavily used. And then like that snapshot of 2021 June, we had 9 vehicle failures. Our mechanic wasn't able to do any of regular maintenance during that period. It was just trying to get our guys back on the road. That naturally impacted our level of service in the parks. So when we're constantly with the age and reaction mode, we find it hard to get to our regular maintenance at times.
Okay.
But we are very strict with our maintenance.
Okay. Looking at just automotive market as a whole, with the semiconductor shortage that I think estimates I've seen is maybe the next 12 to 18 months might be back to a normal supply chain. I mean, do you think it would be maybe a little wiser to wait until that is straightened? I mean, cars are at an all-time high as far as price goes. I mean, is this something you would want to implement once prices kind of get more towards where they should be? Or is this something you'd want implemented now?
in speaking with the enterprise fleet lease team, and they have a pretty good finger on the pulse there. They anticipate and are recommending that we initiate this soon. For 2023 vehicles, the pre-order opens in June. They say every year after they anticipate seeing increased pricing regardless of part availability. I'm not sure what's driving that. We can make guesses, but so my suggestion is order this June for a 2023 delivery, so we can stop repairing our really old equipment and or some that's not repairable. And I guess my understanding is with these fleet vehicles, they're limited in production. Chevy or Ford only manufactures X amount, and you need to get on that list, or you will be buying off a lot, and the cost will be much more. Won't be able to utilize our state contract pricing.
So the contract pricing helps us a lot there, but we know there's a long waiting period, and that's part of how this has been staggered. We start with the mowing. We're looking ahead at the end of that 5-year period, so we'll have them staggered as far as the buyout at the end, and again, trying to have a design where there's a fairly steady amount that we can count on, whether it be lease payment or buyout, and then sequentially where it's very logical and sustainable that way. So by starting with the mowing stuff this year, the reality is it could be, there's a very small amount as far as the timing and how long it will take to get these. So that weight is very much factored into the plan that we've put together, the time it takes.
On the mowing equipment, you're anticipating a 5-year lease. Have you considered doing a longer term lease, or does that just work into your rotation cycle?
It works really well in the rotation, and my understanding it's financially the most beneficial, the way the equipment depreciates.
Yeah, so what I'm worried about is that the legislature will continue to push to get rid of, or to get electric mowers and get rid of everything that's gas powered. And so they can't interfere with the contract that's already existing. And so at the end of 5 years, if all you've got is a 5-year lease, the legislation will force you to go to a new vehicle, as opposed to buying an existing vehicle and being able to get another extended life out of it. So I'm just trying to suggest that anticipate stupid stuff and build that into your schedule so that you aren't in 5 years reacting to a piece of legislation that, you know, forces you to do something else.
Kirk, does the anticipated leasing arrangement with Toro incorporate or allow the incorporation of alternative mowers, alternative propelled mowers in the future? Say they come out with a proven electrified mower. Does it allow for that to be incorporated into the range of options that we have available to us?
Yes, Toro, every piece of equipment they offer on the commercial side is available in the government purchase contracts. The lease would be handled by a third party. So long story short, yes.
So on a 5-year, if you look at the financial economics of it, a 5-year lease with a buyout at the end of the 5 compared to a 10-year lease term, legislation aside, financially, it's a better approach, in your opinion, to do it that way versus a 10-year lease. But with the legislation potentially out there that could impact that, maybe not the economics, but the requirements.
Yeah, if we were doing it based on the economics, I think what he's proposed is a good plan, 5 and 5. I just worry about legislature forcing us to get rid of what makes common sense and doing what the legislature wants. And so that's what I'm worried about.
I think factor in lifespan and replacement too with the 5-year period, which would allow us to rotate the newer stuff in, but we lease it for 5, acquire, own it another 5, and start another lease at the end of each 5-year period.
Your plan is good as long as the legislature doesn't screw it up. That's what I'm worried about is, you know,
Right.
you get down this plan and 5 years down the road, you've got to start all over again because.
You can't purchase it.
And then
now.
you got to purchase it and then we
Right.
don't have the money to be able to purchase new vehicles. And now we're ended up having to finance it. That's what I'm trying to avoid is getting you guys caught.
Because the contract would be for the leasing for 5 years, like on the mower.
Right.
If we have to go to electric mower, then we're not gonna be able to purchase that mower at the end of 5 years because the legislature in that meantime has said we
It won't allow us.
yeah.
Won't allow it.
So even though you think it's part of your contract, it's not really, because then that's a.
Would be
mean-
prohibited, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good ideas die at the Olympia
So I think we just wanna, have you look at what
Because
that,
of,
because of Olympia. Yeah.
That's why
Sure.
you can't have that.
sure,
because as you know, I mean, that bill wasn't,
that,
fairly didn't pass, didn't stay. So I mean, I anticipate.
Okay.
there could be more of that coming forward, because they
Well, we-
weren't
yeah, we
offering,
can look at that entire
Research that,
break, we
absolutely.
can research the 10-year.
they weren't offering any grant opportunities
No.
for anybody with that,
No.
just forcing.
Another unfunded mandate for local government.
Correct. Yeah, was concerned.
Do you guys happen to recall in the legislation, was it a hard phase out, meaning if you owned it, you could continue to operate it? Or was it requiring, as of the legislation passing, you had to get rid of them, mothball them and purchase new ones?
I think it was specific to new purchases, so I don't think it affected anything
That was in the.
in
fleet.
inventory.
So the price of parts went up in anticipation of this because
Yeah,
it just,
and the resale value would presumably plummet on these things too.
Yep. Which is again, one of the intents.
So with thinking, could we just purchase instead of lease? I know leasing carries it over several years, but is there a way to just purchase and finance it over a few years?
So those 6 mowers I was referencing to purchase outright with tax would be $182,000. And that only resolves half of our mowing fleet needs at this time. The other needs, each one of those mowers, and we have several, retail for $150,000 each. So this first lease that I'm speaking to is the less expensive. The next would be well over 400,000. So we're combined nearing $700,000 to replace our needs,
Just on the mowing
just
side.
on mowing equipment alone.
Does Tesla make a mower on the front of theirs? No.
We want to be first in line if they do.
Yeah. Gosh.
Kurt, what is a comparable 700,000 to replace the entire mowing fleet? What does that look like with the leasing strategy that you've highlighted? What's the cost of ownership? The 5-year leasing plus the buyout.
For total,
For all of our, if you were to look at 700,000, what would it be with the strategy of leasing for 5 years and then buying them at the end of 5 years?
by the end of the 5-year lease, it'll take roughly 20% for the buyout. So I don't have that number offhand, but I could take a
Be interesting to just look at and compare the two.
You're probably an additional $200,000 if I had to pull it off the top of my head.
To lease it, or
To lease with the buyout, but all in one. Lease everything. Is that what you're referencing?
No, if you were just to run it out, you said there's two tranches. You do
Yes.
a 5-year lease and then a buyout, another 5-year lease and a buyout. I believe that would accomplish your life cycle replacement. So if you look at those two sets of leasing and buyout, what is that financial outlay look like compared to an outright purchase of them. You can look at that. You
Yeah,
don't,
we
I
can-
don't,
we
I'm
can
not
Let
looking.
me look at that.
So,
Yeah, I don't think we looked at financing a purchase, so that's something we could certainly talk to Gary about and see
Yes.
what type of options are there, because that could be an alternative where it's under our ownership and we finance it for a 10-year period of time, or however we look at doing that, 5-year buyout, similar.
Does the leasing arrangement you've talked about require you to buy it or give an option to buy it?
It's option to buy.
Option.
Make it requirement.
We can look into that.
And that is an option, that, yes,
Yes, oh, good.
we were presented both those. But, with Gary's advice, we went towards the fair market value.
But there
We could
is-
do a dollar buyout.
We'd be contractually obligated, which could satisfy
Yes.
the legislative side of it and have a similar cost to what we're looking at here. Okay, so that could be an alternative that we intentionally pursue with that in mind.
The plan is sound because you're spreading the financial needs over a longer period of time with a reduced buyout of it. And it helps you with when you're creating your life cycle replacement, gets into a sustainable plan, puts it out over many years, as opposed to lump sums at the beginning, which you're then looking at another lump sums after the end of 10 years. And it doesn't really allow you to spread this in terms of a manageable budget approach. So what you've laid out is a manageable budget approach.
Right. Very much.
any other thoughts or comments?
No, the idea of mandatory buyout might be a way to get around the legislature.
At least for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then as the market evolves from electrification standpoint, it allows us to pivot into that with still a leasing strategy, perhaps.
So has Gary reviewed the numbers?
I think the important part to point out with Doug and Kurt's presentation is in slide 5. It really shows if the board is supportive of utilizing those raceway proceeds to seed this kind of long-term sustainable capital replacement program, which makes sense for a lot of reasons in terms of just managing budget needs over time. There is enough for nearly 4 years to be able to utilize those raceway proceeds. Then it becomes a need for us to build that into our operating budget starting in the year 2000, part of 2025 and into 2026. And using 2026, it's about 230,000 between operations and budget. And what does it look like in the out years? Similar numbers varying up and down a little bit.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
I got
And
you.
Gary has a comment. So Gary, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. I just wanted to make the observation that if you wanted to convert this from a operating lease to a capital lease with a $1 buyout, you'd also substantially increase the lease payments on it. And the model that we were trying to present here when I was working with Parks was to try to alleviate the cash flow needs to fit within a certain constraint. So that's just one of those things that you can't change. If you're going to go to a $1 buyout at the end of the lease and call it a capital lease, that will adjust and change some of the numbers that you're using for your forecasted cash flows in future years.
Thank you. So I think maybe just a little bit more work on what we, trying to figure out how to make that work. So it's a mandatory buyout. It doesn't have to be at $1. I mean, because you were at
Right, if we can have similar buyout to what we have now, that would be preferred. go and verify that option or whatever option may be available.
Yes.
And come back, that would be helpful. Okay,
I think so.
very much welcome the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Super. Good, yeah, thank you. We'll be pleased to come back, and believe it or not, I think we have one more presentation for you related to a grant opportunity that we're pretty excited to pursue. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Knowles, who will introduce this project, and our presenter, Ms. Neff.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Good morning, board. Yeah, I have the pleasure of introducing Julie Neff, who is one of our project managers, and she's a landscape architect and very skilled, and has really taken this project to a great point where we're ready to hopefully successfully apply for grant applications. So I will turn it over to Julie.
All right, well, thank you, Paul. Good morning, commissioners. This presentation is to follow on the direction given the Parks Department last June of 2021, and that's regarding Bear Lake Regional Park. So I'd like to start with a brief reintroduction to the park, give you an update on what's happened on the project over the past year, and then talk about next steps in the Parks Department's grant authorization request. So as a reminder, Bear Lake is located about 15 miles north of Spokane, immediately adjacent to Highway 2. Next. The park is popular for outdoor recreation. Walking is a top activity, and thanks to your help last year, we were able to restore the trail that goes all the way around the lake. And I'll talk more about that later in the presentation. Next. So one of the reasons that Bear Lake is special is because it's one of the only lakes in this region that's designated for youth, disabled, and senior fishing. And the Department of Fish and Wildlife stocks fish here to help provide a quality fishing experience for those individuals. There's one small pier out there now, and you can see there are also canoes and kayaks out there. Okay, next slide. Other activities are picnicking, swimming, and launching small watercraft. Next. And as you can see on hot summer days, it's a really popular destination. So the park is really well loved. It gets a lot of use, and some of the infrastructure has reached its end of life. Next slide. So last June, you, the board, approved the Parks Department's request for 3 projects. The first was pathway repair, temporary fencing was the second, and then third, shoreline design. So the next few slides are a refresher on why these requests were made, and then to update you on the status of those projects and the next steps. Next. So you may remember this slide from last year. One of the challenges was that the pathway on the north side of the lake was flooding every spring. Next. So here are the before and after images of the project. It was completed on schedule last November. Next. And here it is from the other side. You can see that the trail was raised about 3 feet over its previous grade. The bio bags that are holding up that new grade will eventually fill in with plants, and this will look like it's always been there, except now the water will stay on the lakeside. Next. So another challenge is that the shorelines on the east and the west side of the lake need repairs. The gabion baskets that were installed on both beaches, and the beaches are highlighted with the yellow lines, they were installed in the 1990s, and they're failing. So there's also human-caused erosion along the adjacent shorelines. Next. And on the east shore, here's some images. You can see that part of the beach and the gabion baskets are underwater. The photo on the right shows an eroded area where people are currently launching canoes and kayaks because there's not a designated boat launch. Okay, next slide. Do you have the next slide?
Yeah, hold on a second, please.
Oh, okay.
It's a secret. We're not showing it.
Yeah, it's not pretty. Okay, this is the west, so the previous slide. There we go. Okay, on the west shore, you can see where the gabion baskets are failing. And then on the right, the photo on the right, you can see the significant human-caused erosion, and risk management advised the Parks Department to remove the benches and install temporary fencing along that area, as well as the area along the gabion baskets where they're very unstable. So this entire area has been fenced. And if you go to the next slide, the temporary fencing was installed by park operations at the direction of risk management and with your support last September. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the shoreline design and phase 1 master plan for the park. The project began in September, and we've included the public at key steps in the design process. We're now at 60% design, and we're getting ready to submit an application to RCO for funding on May 3rd. And if we're successful, we'll be notified in June of next year. Okay, next slide. These are the 2 focus areas for the shoreline design project. And what we learned during public outreach is that this park is highly valued, especially by people with mobility challenges because of its accessibility in the natural setting. And the opportunity to enjoy a variety of introductory outdoor recreation experiences. We heard that some of the top recreational opportunities are walking, viewing wildlife, fishing, swimming, and paddling canoes or kayaks. So in the next few slides, I'd like to show you how the design responds to what we learned. First, I'll show you the East Shore and then go to the West Shore. Okay, next slide. Okay, on the East Shore, this is the 60% design, and I won't go into this in detail, but the highlights are to remove the gabion basket walls and create a sand beach instead. On the north side of the beach, we've got an ADA accessible trail. Then we'll restore the shoreline area along the trail, remove the existing undersized pier, and then install a new, larger, low-maintenance fishing pier further north. Once the smaller pier has been removed, then we can create an expanded kayak and canoe launch where people are currently unofficially launching, and create an automobile turnaround and a boat drop-off with ADA parking. Okay, next slide. On the west side, we'd like to restore the eroded areas shown in green to improve habitat, and then install 2 new low-maintenance fishing piers, one on the north side, north of the beaches, and then one to the south. The gabion basket walls would become boulder and sand beaches to allow much improved water access. And then you can see that we also provided an ADA accessible trail on the north side of the beach, on the west side as well. Okay, next. So in the swim beach areas, we'd like to remove these gabion basket walls and create much better water access, similar to the image below. And in addition to stairs, we would also include a walkway for ADA access. Okay, next. Recently, we sent out a request for letters of support for the project for the RCO grant, and we're really excited about the early response. For example, Team River Runner provided a letter not only from their local chapter, but also from their national chapter. And if you're not familiar with them, Team River Runner is an organization dedicated to helping heal our wounded and ill vets and their families through adaptive paddling adventures. And Bear Lake is considered by them to be a perfect first open water paddle. Since these letters came in, we also received a pledge for $5,000 for the project for ADA pathway connections from a local nonprofit, Inland Northwest Adaptive. Okay, next slide. So we're now at 60% design, and the consultant's opinion of probable cost is $3.128 million. And as I said, park staff is getting ready to submit a grant application to RCO for that amount. A 50% match is required, and we're proposing that the county match $1.58 million. The project and the amount identified is included in the 6-year capital improvement plan for 2023, and funds would not be needed until 2023 if the grant is if we're successful in getting the grant award. So I'm here today to request that the Board of County Commissioners authorize the funding match and authorize staff to proceed with the RCO grant application. Okay, next. Are there any questions that I can try to answer?
What do you think the likelihood is of us getting this grant? We get a lot of grants brought, you know, that we sign letters to, that we apply, that we don't get. I mean, what do you think the chances are of us securing this one?
You know, I'm going to take a shot at it, and then I'll probably turn it over to Paul because he's been through this a few times. It's very competitive, and I think more so this year than in the years past. That said, I think there's quite a bit of funding in the category that we're going for. So, Paul, do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, yeah, I'll add that we are applying this grant. This particular grant application is going to be in the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So that's a federal funding source that I think back 2 or 3 years ago, Congress reauthorized that fund and increased the amount significantly for that fund. So in turn, the state also upped the ceiling for which we could apply for grant funding in that category. And there's just a lot more funding available. So we feel like it's a good fit. And with the focus on ADA and water access, we think this is a very competitive grant application and project.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, if it was on that last slide. When would we know if we were successful in getting the grant? Once we apply, when does it close, and when do they make their decision?
So basically, Julie will go through the application process through the summer, and the preliminary rankings will come out, I believe, early to mid-October of this year. And at that point, we'll have a good sense, and RCO staff will have a good sense whether we're under or within that funding zone for the project. So, and then we have to wait basically another year before we actually get the grant funding. So.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
So I guess to clarify, so you'll know by the end of this year, but the funding doesn't come until next year, which is why you're saying June of 2023 for funding.
Correct. Yeah, that's with any of these RCO grant applications that we submit. Yeah, there's a long lag time between the application process and when we're actually awarded the funding.
So so is this going through the feds, not the state, or is it federal money coming through the states?
It's federal funding coming through the state. Yep,
Okay.
and basically being administered through the Recreation and Conservation Office.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So either Paul or Julie, nice to see you again, Julie. I think we go back almost, well, we won't talk about how many years. If one of you could circle back with Scott Chesney and remind him that this is probably a park that would qualify as an improved park because we've made significant investments in it so that they make sure that they capture it when they're totaling their LOS compliant parks.
Okay, noted.
Thank you.
Yep.
So, Madam Chair, I would move that we authorize our Parks Department to go ahead and submit a grant application to RCO as described by staff this morning.
I will second the motion.
And a motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next on the agenda, we have Tessa Sheldon to talk about budget amendments.
Good morning, commissioners. Looks like my video's having an issue. Apologize for that. But I'll go ahead and get going now that Ron has us on the board. These are routine budget amendments for the first quarter of the year, now that we're almost done with April. I'll just call a few to your attention. Item number 2, Spokane Valley law enforcement vehicles. The Valley decided late in the year to fund $1.455 million in law enforcement vehicles specific to the city of Spokane. So we're just appropriating that revenue coming in to the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office is managing that purchase with purchasing. Ron, I'll have you skip over to page 2.
Yes, it is. Just a clarification, City Spokane Valley, correct?
Yes. Sorry if I skipped that. Item number 7, developmental disabilities. This is an amendment for 2021 and 2022. So it's 1 million and change in each year. And it's state funding that we basically have to jump from year to year for, it's called working capital loan from the state through the Developmental Disabilities Fund. Item number 10, Ron, down below, is the construction portion of the budget for the small arms range. So this is just getting the budget set up so Bruce can go ahead and start spending away while we work on getting bond proceeds brought into the fund. Ron, on the next page, item number 11. These are various encumbrance rollovers. So these are purchase orders that weren't fully executed at the end of 2021. And departments still had commitments outstanding. So we have moved the budget from 2021 to 2022. In the general fund, the largest department rollover is the sheriff's office. And that's for a lot of miscellaneous equipment for most of their specialty units. We have the Bearcat that was being purchased, a new Sprinter van for the hostage negotiation team, and then various equipment items for explosives and forensics and other units in the sheriff's office. And then the golf fund had the next kind of big purchase there, and that was all items outstanding relating to the Latah Creek Clubhouse renovations. So that project is ongoing. And then Ron, I'll have you skip ahead to page 5, item number 19. And that is the ARP revenue that we received from the federal government. And that amount, $43.3 million, matches the first quarter plan that you all adopted several weeks ago now. So we have all of that funding appropriated so Arian and group can continue to move forward with getting those dollars out into the community as RFPs are awarded and contracted. Any questions?
No.
Nope.
Perfect.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So that takes us to Lieutenant Don Hooper for the detention services.
Well, good
update.
morning.
Good morning.
Is over here fine? Where would you like me?
You're fine. I think
Oh, okay.
1 foot over.
Printouts? Anybody?
we've got it.
I think we got it.
Okay, great.
Well, first off, this is Don Hooper. He's the interim director. He's there for 6 months, and then we'll do an evaluation and then talk about stuff moving forward. Don brings a lot of experience to the table. 20 plus years of detention services, has been at all steps and all levels, kind of similar to what I did. Also has a lot of experience in working with lawsuits, IAs, unfortunately, and some of the other, deeds that aren't necessarily as fun to do. Great administrative skills and has support of his peers. So, Don Hooper.
Well, thank you. It's been about a month. It's been quite a challenge, just taking right into it. I had a little family emergency in the middle of it, as those things happen to all of us. And so now the last 2 or 3 weeks, kind of just get into it. And Mike and I have been meeting almost on a weekly, a couple times a week, just trying to figure out, is this where we should be going? Trying to learn the things I didn't know before. So, but first come up with, you want me to come up with, or for you guys, kind of our goals moving forward for the next kind of what's 6 months is going to go fast. I'm 6 weeks into this and I'm looking, it's going to go really fast. So what do we do for the next 6 months? And so came up with 4 things that I thought were important. I think we all think are important within detention services, but I don't want to read all of it all right down the list, but basically eliminate. I'm always hesitant to do that. I'm hesitant to tell you I'm going to eliminate deaths and suicides in the jail. That's obviously our goal. I struggled with that. I don't want to put minimize, but we want to eliminate. I don't know if that's a realistic goal, but that's definitely our goal. So minimize use of force, something I think we've done a great job in. Probably about the last year, we've really focused on the new House bills at the state level that really identified how we handle force within the jail. And it is just a necessary part of what the business we do. We've really worked hard. We have a committee. We go meet every week. We're used to be on like a quarterly basis and a monthly. We meet every single week and look at a use of force, video, photo evidence, the medical reports. Everyone is as immediately as possible. And I think we've made huge strides in that. We are actually, when you look at the top 2 goals, we're much happier where we're at there than we were 6 months or even a year ago, well before I was in this position. Those are just things we've been doing already. So the next page was how we got there for in custody deaths, suicide. Basically, we've asked for you, the board, for a lot of budget to put towards that. Our medical provider NAF care, we keep hiring more medical providers within. We've had increases to the contract because we have 4 times a day detox checks, those kind of things. We brought 4 staff members on that just escort them around to make sure nobody slips through the cracks, that none of the inmates that are going through withdrawals go more than 6 hours without being seen by us. So we think that's one of the biggest things, biggest impact on keeping people alive in the jail. So COVID prevention, that's been our whole last 2 years. Don't say we're out of the woods yet, but we're in a spot now it's really manageable. We're looking at 1 case every now and then, and we don't have any current cases right now. So vaccines, we offer a number of other vaccines partnering with the health department. So hopefully same thing, keeping our people healthy. Then along the lines with suicides and deaths in jail, we piloted a second psych RN within the jail. Just 1 wasn't enough to see all the need that had the need. Increased mental health coverage. We hired 1 more mental health professional last year in order to help see all the inmates. We went from twice or once every 2 years to yearly suicide prevention training for all of our staff. So just saying that this is a big thing within our industry. So, and then suicidal self-harm inmates, because now with the extra mental health professional, we're able to see each one of them. If they're on a watch, they're seen every single day. So, and then I think I discussed that already, minimize use of force. Same thing, weekly meetings, we added members to it, including medical staff, use of force instructors, as well as command staff to that, to look at every single use of force. We watch every single video. Every time force is used, we have eyes on it. We're done. So, and then the results of the committee are reviewed for future training. So the goal is no force used, minimize use of force. Also, same things we're striving for. The 2 goals, I don't know if we're doing quite as well. There's going to be more of a challenge for moving forward. Conditions of confinement for our inmates. As everybody, I'm sure you've heard over and over, we're full. We're full at the end, and since pre-COVID numbers, we're moving right back to where we were. So down at the bottom, I think it shows ADP pre-COVID. We were at 960. And I included staff vacancies as well. That's obviously a challenge. Those 2 I kind of grouped together. 732, the first year of COVID. I'm sorry. I didn't ask you to keep going on this slide. So
he's keeping up.
732, we had 16 vacancies. And so with COVID, we've had staff shortages is the next biggest challenge for us. 770 was our ADP last year with 27. And first quarter of this year, we're already up to 795. And at least traditionally, the summer's our peak population for inmates. So the summer, I think we'll be well into the 800s moving forward in the summer. And we currently have 41 vacancies within detention services. We have about 300 staff, so.
So what do
So,
you?
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So what do you think is leading to the high number of vacancies, and what do you think we need to look at to turn that around?
So I'm meeting Ashley Cameron actually tomorrow about that. I mean, there were a number of different things we believe, but we just settled the contract for that. So that just basically they're just getting paid for that, this last paycheck and this check. And so, but that was about 2 years without a contract. And I think the wages were not competitive is what we're being told. And then there was a lot of other vacancies within law enforcement. So detention services is a big feeder for local law enforcement. And so they're hiring as fast as we can hire. And so those two things right there, I think the contract's going to have a big impact. We're hiring a group of 5 on Monday the 2nd. And we're getting more interest than we'd had in the past. We brought on hiring bonuses. We had a meeting about hiring bonuses, I don't know, a few months back. The hiring bonuses, like the sheriff's office, has had a big impact. So I think we're heading in the right direction. Next things I don't know if we're doing as great a job at is just getting out there. We have a recruitment team that meets on a monthly basis, but we're getting to job fairs and those things. It's just not having enough impact. So Ashley and I are meeting tomorrow. What's the next step? Something along like getting a social media type, somebody that really focuses on social media just for us. I mean, we're looking at that many vacancies. So those are some of the things, just getting it out there, getting the vacancies on these phones. That's where people are looking. It's not on, obviously not on Craigslist and those things like we used to do. So, and keeping up to date on that. So I think, does that answer your question? Yep.
So when you have someone who's interested, then what do they go through? Because I know like on the sheriff's side, it's like a year process. I don't know how long it is.
It's 3 months to get on. So if I meet this person today, it's 3 months later by the time we hire. And we keep trying to reduce that, but 3 months is about what we can get it to right now with medical, psychological tests, polygraphs, just all the steps involved, physical ability tests, written tests. And so we'd love to get that down. I think the idea would be nice to get it to 2 months instead of 3 and not lose candidates, but because we do lose a fair amount that while we're trying to hire them, they get picked by somebody else, by state patrol or city or something like that.
So.
But there's an academy too. Is that what you were getting?
Right, and so
yeah.
then it takes that long just to go through that process, and then you hire them, and then how long till they're actually in the jail?
Well, and then, so that would be day 1. We do our own in-house academy, which is about 6 weeks. And then we send them off to the state academy for another 10 weeks. And so 16 weeks, so what do you add? That's another 4 months. So you're right. That's 7 months until they're actually a viable employee working for us. So, and some of those we can't, there's nothing we can do. The state academy's mandated. Yeah. So.
And they increased their time to 10 weeks here just last year, right?
Yes, it went from 4 to 10. We were thinking, it's going to go from 4 to 6 or something. They went from 10 basically overnight, which huge impact. I mean, huge impact for us. So.
And then since we can't have a training facility over here, everyone has to go over to Burien, right?
Correct. Yeah. Actually, Director Sparber and we talked to the director of the state academy, and we're like, hey, what would we do? We'd put it on, we'd come up with facilities, instructors, everything. And we were told, no, it's not even open for discussion, just not.
And it was a no and crickets.
Yeah.
And there was a no after discussion about it at all.
Not open to having an offsite academy. They just weren't interested in it.
So 10 weeks at the state academy, what is it if somebody were to go work at a state prison though? Is it, they do 10 weeks?
They do what they call as core. When I got hired, they went to the same academy, but now they go to what they call as a core academy. They do it all in-house. And I really couldn't tell you with any accuracy exactly what theirs is. I imagine they're teaching most of the same things, but I don't know that for a fact.
So the state allowed them to create their own training for the state of Washington. So they have their own academy.
So yeah, obviously challenges, more inmates and less staff. So it's.
Everybody's created equal, but some are created more.
Yes, exactly. The state helps. So looking at the population numbers going up. So the next page, I think I'm on next page, Ron, please. So increasingly violent offenders. At the beginning of COVID, population dropped. because they weren't contacting a lot, the non-violent offenders weren't coming in, they weren't having many contacts. But in the last 2 years, it appears that population, our own population, and I think we're looking at it, the average length of stay is going up too. We looked at that, and we were up 17 days, and I didn't include that in there. 17 days middle of last year, and it's moving towards 21 days is the average length of stay now. So they're more violent. The cases are taking longer in court, and they're staying longer. So currently 238 that we call 28% of our population is considered a violent offender. 52 murder charges currently, which number kind of blew me out of the water. I was like, there's 52 people in custody right now for murder, which was, I had no idea until we looked it up last week.
So of those, how many of those would you estimate are homegrown as opposed to gang members that are moving into the community, or other individuals that are moving into the community out of Seattle, where I understand we've got a pipeline to Southern California for gangs.
Sure.
So is our violent offender numbers, are we growing them here locally, or are they coming into the region?
I don't know if I'd have a good answer for you. My feeling now is they're coming and they're staying is what I would feel like now, because we're seeing a number of the offenders. We see the same offenders over and over, and it usually doesn't start out at murder. It starts out at property crimes and drug crimes, and then we're seeing them later on. But the gang involved, I think I included the gang involved somewhere in here. Maybe it was just, I don't remember what the number is, but a lot of them are gang involved. And so did they come from Southern California? Did they come up through the Tri-Cities as part with the drug trade? Absolutely. So, but I think they're staying. I think the market's open here, so they're staying is what's happening. So,
And they're younger too, as well.
yeah. So the juveniles probably going to have the same, I don't know what they, but they're same thing, more and more violent people over there. So housing crisis. So just because of the quarantine over those years. So over the 2 years of quarantine, we had 2 floors dedicated just to quarantining the inmates for the first 14 days, just out of necessity, we've had to reduce that down to 10, and now we're down to 5 days of quarantine. Luckily, we don't have a lot of COVID cases, and we're not having a lot in the community or within detention services. We're able to accommodate that, but we're down, so we were able to reduce from 2 down to 1, but we don't even know how long are we going to be able to keep that up, the 1 quarantine floor, just kind of day by day, week by week on top of it. So I gave you a whole bunch of reasons why we're having the housing problems. And then that last page, I think second to last page, staff assaults. So talking about gang involved in 95 that are gang involved. That's where it says. So 95 of around mid 700s, high 700s. So they're gang involved. 2020, we had 7 staff assaults. 21, we had 11. And just the first quarter of this year, we already have 5. So on pace for 20 staff assaults. So yeah, so just let you know some of the things we're dealing with over there. I think if that's so. And then the last thing, I think the things we've made some big improvements on, we've continued to quarantine what we can, now down to 5 days. We now have a process in place. Prior to deaths, we had like in back 18, when I was a custody lieutenant, we put in place all of our security rounds. Now they're viewed on camera, but now we have a sergeant's review each one of those rounds, watch the camera, making sure that the officers are doing what they're doing, and the lieutenants review the sergeant to it. So we didn't have that in place with the honor system back then, and we just find the same thing. People get busy, people do, and people make mistakes. But now we think we have a much better grasp on rounds than we ever did in the past. Self-harm and watches, like I said earlier, they're seen every single day. So we have the coverage in mental health that somebody on a watch is seen every single day. And then cell searches, module rules, just all the other improvements for conditions and confinement, getting up there, getting our sergeants up there and checking, making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to for the inmates.
So Don, how has the new scanners for the body scanners and the nail scanners helped?
overdoses, and between that and COVID, and we tried the COVID quarantine and the body scanners basically almost came on simultaneously. And so we believe the overdoses in the jail are much reduced. I didn't bring the numbers, but we are not having, well, we knew what the deaths were back in 2018. And so overdoses are very infrequent now, and we're just not having it. So which one is helping more? We believe that the quarantine helped a lot too. And by that, we had to kind of look at it after the fact, is that people on quarantine, dope does still get into jail. In people bring it on board themselves. They bring it in. It does even get through the body scanner. Use large amounts of stuff in the body scanner you can see, but if you're talking about a pill or a small baggie, those things, the technology is not that perfect. And so, but this gets in. Our belief is that if you've been out on the streets and you've been taking drugs or taking dope, you built up a tolerance. You give it out to somebody that's been in jail for 6 months. We had a lot of overdoses when it was being shared because we're quarantining those inmates. They don't have the ability to share with other inmates. So that's the best we can figure, is that had the biggest impact on reducing the overdoses within jail. So we're down to one housing module, but the first 5 days, they don't go anywhere else. They have no other in contact with any other offenders. So
that could be something you would continue even without COVID protocols, just as a matter of.
Right. We want to have an extension to 2 West, which is our intake 4. That extra bit of time helps cut that down. And then the ones that are going through DT, we try to keep them in that area so that it's just a one-stop shop. You know, they can go up and look at the DTs and get around. And then also, got the mail scanner, and our folks over there are doing a good job with it. Any letters that come into the jail, we're photocopying now. So they don't even get the original letter anymore. Remember, they were tearing out the pieces of it to get high off it. And so I think on that front, the last 2 years, we worked really, really hard on trying to keep the contraband out. And thank you for your help too with the body scanner.
So what percentage of the population do you think are FTAs now? Are we making any headway at all with the FTAs?
I would say, and I would say that, I don't have a number off the top of my head.
Fine.
But I would say that the majority of the ones that come in for district court and some from municipal court, very to pure warrants. So I'd have to actually do a look at it and have him run the numbers for you, but I could tell you that. And then Scott and I were just looking at the municipal numbers, and it stays with 17%. Is that what it was? So it's around that bandwidth. And I would imagine, because there's a lot of charges we're ORing right out of the booking area. So that tells me that it's more than likely warrants, and what those warrants are for, probably FTA or something like that, going to comply. So don't see very many holds at that level, and at district court, don't see very many holds for those as well. That gets into the felony side or from the DOC or some of those type of. So I could do an evaluation for you and find out.
Ballpark number, at one time it was the biggest population in the jail. I don't know whether it still is or it's been overcome, or if they're, you're having to release FTAs so that you can make room for other more, dangerous crimes or, frequent flyers for the jail.
On April 1st, FTA population was 152, but that was a month ago, almost a month ago.
Yeah.
So basically a fourth of the population.
Yeah, and I don't think I identified whether it was municipal or district.
It's just a generic FTA population, 152, and that was when total population was 765.
So I could drill down more and find out exactly for you.
yeah, I'd be curious to know, is that all they're being held on as well? Is just that FTA, or is there other charges that would hold them? Otherwise, even if the FTA wasn't there, yeah.
Right. And so are you at a stage to where to be able to maintain the COVID protocols and all the other things, are you at a stage to where you have to release inmates, potential offenders, because you don't have room? You've got capacity and stuff. So but we're filling it up.
So we have hardly any capacity. The capacity we have is out at Geiger. And so, you know, at the beginning, we were seeing the quarantine where it was 14 days, average length of stay is 17 days. We were seeing them get out before they could go make it out to Geiger. That's changed a little bit. We filled the population up out at Geiger, not filled up, but I think we're up to 200.
Yeah,
I would imagine. You know, and the capacity is like 326 or 3, somewhere in that range. And so there is a slight change out. It's starting to move. The population is starting to float back out to Geiger. They've shortened the span from 14 days down to 5 days. That's probably had a big increase on that part of it too. But inside the jail, we're moving people all the time to try to make room for someone else. So it's literally at times up on the 3rd floor, there's three to a cell. And so it gets extremely packed, especially over the weekends. Long weekends are particularly problematic.
And into
for us.
Monday today, until
Yeah.
court starts releasing people today. Monday is always our biggest challenge. Yeah.
And what you see is us going to red light status a little more often. I don't know if you guys are seeing that or not, but and it's because we have to wait for people to get out, like you're saying, to get people back, to move people upstairs to put them in the cells.
Yeah, so we still are at that stage now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We moved 40 when we dropped the COVID quarantine numbers down. We were able to move 40 people within 2 or 3 days out to Geiger. So bring their population from 150 to 190. People that, same thing, that would have got out during that quarantine time before but brought that, and we brought the Marshall's population down about 20. Same thing, just to make room. And we're still pretty close to 1 bed for 1 bed almost. Yeah. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Any other questions?
I think you have one more slide, right?
Oh, yeah, okay. I think that talked about recruiting efforts, and so I'm meeting Ashley tomorrow about that. 28 corrections officer vacancies, the most I've ever seen. The others were administrative and kitchen. We've already worked. A lot of help from Ashley already, a lot of help from the board. Hiring bonuses and the new contract, I believe are going to have an impact. And then Aaron Lind, our IT guy, in-house IT, is working on the website, kind of make it easier to navigate one click in the hiring process. You go to the county, there's a lot of different steps to get to where do I want to be a corrections officer. And so we're trying to expedite that, just put one quick link, and Aaron's done a lot. Aaron and Ivana worked on that a lot. And then we're already at a lot of community events. We're at fairs, all the local, the fairs, the rodeos, just the last not fishing game show, whatever, I can't remember the show at the convention center. We're trying to get out there, and we have recruiting or people from detention services out there handing out applications and cards and showing the website. So we're trying to get out there now. What's that next step to get more people in the bot? And so.
And we're targeting that, the colleges along with Fairchild Air Force Base. We're targeting
Reserve centers. So we've got people out there. Yeah. Last time we met with Ashley, she was pretty happy with what we've done at this point, but same thing, it's not having the downstream impact quite yet. So but what's next? What are our next things we get out there?
And the one thing I throw out too is with Geiger, we've had to bring some staff from Geiger down to the jail to work, you guys remember. And so the capacity out there won't go to full capacity, and I have their staff downtown working to fill posts down here. So it'll probably be about 200, maybe 225, and then it will level off because we won't be able to use the rest of it. So.
Do you see where people leave the state corrections facilities to come here, or?
We get people from a lot of people from outside of from East, just like the sheriff's offices, East Coast, California. We're getting a number, about half of our applicants are laterals now moving in from other areas, so which is great. So if they're a true lateral within the state, we don't have to send them to the 10-week academy. They can do I think it's a 2-week equivalency academy. So that helps a lot. So.
Great.
Anything else? Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate the update.
So in the laterals, that 2-week academy, is that just to teach them how to say Gonzaga?
It is.
Yeah.
Gonzaga. You gotta get that right out. Yep.
Right here, Chad, it's all warmed up for you.
Even Barkley used to get it wrong.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Keep it up.
Congratulations on being in.
Well, thank you. Yes. It's been quite a while.
I'm sure. He's done the other side.
Okay.
Okay, well, welcome, Chad. I'll let you
Oh, you guys
introduce
done
your.
Okay, yep. Does anyone need a copy? I brought some extras.
I don't know if you guys know these folks. I think you do, but this is Andy Shank. He's our maintenance and operations manager. And Jim Cotter is his assistant. Jim does all the work.
Definitely.
Makes us look good.
Yeah. And Becca McConaughey. Becca McConaughey, she couldn't make it today, but she's the one, she's our, we call her maintenance administrator. She runs all the numbers, you know, the average per mile or per square yard, does the plan for our preservation program, basically keeps us in all the numbers, and she's on vacation today, so we weren't gonna bug her and make her come in. So thank everybody for giving us the time to go through this. Ask questions along the way. I love to answer questions. So we'll get started. The second slide just shows, Scott said you wanted to kind of focus on our spring work. So this is the majority of what we try to do in the springtime, which is we prepare for our dust abatement. We're working on our gravel roads, which you guys get a lot of calls on our gravel roads this time of year. Pothole patching is another hot topic. Gravel road repair, street cleaning, and then basically repair damages coming out of winter. And those can vary depending on what Mother Nature gives us. So the next slide, I just wanted to give you guys some general numbers. The county talks centerline miles a lot. The city talks lane miles. And so one thing even Jim mentioned when I got here, you know, the city always talked about like 2,200 lane miles. And he thought that the county and the city were about the same size, but the county is running at around almost 5,100 lane miles that we have to maintain. So quite a bit more. And that's, for those of you who don't know, I came from the city 3 years ago, so hopefully I don't reference them too much. But just the sheer size of the county makes our work a lot more difficult. You know, the city's very compact in what they have to do. And then talked about gravel roads, because that's going to be a topic here. I wanted to kind of go through some breakdowns for you. 0 to 250 ADT, we've got about 900 centerline miles that we have to take care of. And using the ITE manual, which is the Institute of Traffic Engineers, at about each household creates 10 trips. That last column kind of identifies approximately how many houses we would have on each of those. And I would imagine ITE should be updating it, because now with Amazon, you know, I see FedEx and UPS and Amazon like 3 or 4 times a day out there. So I think some of those numbers are probably increased, but that's the best data we have. And then I tried to give you examples of roads, really what I wanted to kind of put a picture in your mind what it looks like. So that first category, like a Depot Springs or an Anderson Road, which is down south, that falls into that ballpark. The 250 to 399, that's like a Tallman Road up north, or a Foothills, Mount Spokane area, or a Betts Road out in Cheney. And then your high volume roads, that's like your Newkirks that we've had to deal with the bridge down out there on the West Plains, or Stevens Creek, which is down south going up to one of our park trailheads. In an interesting fact, like below 50, we have about 390 miles below 50. So we've got a lot of these roads out here that really aren't serving a whole lot of residents. So we try to break things down a little bit different, just so everyone can get a picture in their mind. And then the last one is just wanted to touch on our budget. Our maintenance budget's a little over 13 million. Our preservation this year is a little over 8 million, for a total of a $21 million budget. The next slide. Any questions on that? Okay. The next slide, I wanted to kind of talk about our gravel roads, because that's where we get a lot of calls this time of the year. And the failed gravel roads that you guys hear about is less than 1% of our total gravel roads. So it's not a huge issue. To them, it probably is, but really, one of them that we hit the news for, it served, I think, 3 houses past that muddy spot. So just to kind of put a picture of what we're dealing with there. If we get a call about a damage on a road or can't get through, basically within 1 working day, somebody's been up to assess it. Either the foreman or the supervisor from the area to really determine how bad it is, because a lot of times the report we get is impassable and it's in some state of muddiness. And then they prioritize from that. We do put road restrictions in place coming out of winter, depending on, and we don't try to blanket the whole county. We try to be specific about the road because that affects commerce, whether it's house building, logging, all that stuff. So we try to watch and be specific about where we put those road restrictions. In this, we also notify the homeowners what our plan is, the ones that have called us. And we do an ongoing assessment, like one of them, the Webster Road, we couldn't get to because we would have damaged the road farther down. So basically every workday, one of the foremen or the supervisors would visit the site, maybe every other day, to make sure it hasn't gotten any worse. And the repairs are made as soon as possible. And sometimes we push that off because if the damage is done up higher on a gravel road, like Webster was, it's kind of at the top, we can damage the gravel road below it just by running our own trucks and equipment across it. So we try to make sure that we are watching all of that stuff so that we don't cause more damage to our own roads. And the reasons for the failing is usually it's snow and ice. I can walk you through it, but basically the more moisture you get throughout the winter and how bad the freeze is really contributes to how bad it comes out. That road structure freezes, and then in the springtime when it starts to melt, you still got ice down below and it's starting to melt from the top. Usually we get a rainstorm or 2, so that top gets very muddy until that road has a chance to dry out. And sometimes it just takes a day of some wind and some sun, and a bad muddy spot can turn into really a fairly dry area to get through. So again, everyone says, well, how many of these we're going to have? It's totally dictated on what Mother Nature gives us. And again, our guys are always watching it because they don't want to jump on it too soon, because usually we'll cause more damage if we're up digging around it and hauling material in and out. So that goes into a little bit on our seasonal restrictions. One of the questions I've had in the past, when do they go on? Well, we're watching the weather. They usually go on sometime February, March timeframe, depending on when we come out of winter, and they last typically about 6 weeks. We still got a few road restrictions on up north in the higher elevations where we're still getting some freezing, or we had snow last week in a few areas. Trash, buses, and emergency services can run on those roads anytime. We don't restrict that. If it's like an fuel oil provider or septic system, we just ask them to call us, and a lot of times we'll work with them. Sometimes it's easier or it's better for our roads if we say, hey, it looks like we're gonna have freezing temperatures till about 10 today. So if you can get your heavy load in the morning, it protects our roads. It's that when it starts to get soft that really impacts them. So any questions on our gravel road issue? I know you all get calls on them.
Yes, we do.
The next topic is going to be on our springtime gravel road grading. So what I talked about was the structural problems where they would get muddy, mud boils, rutting. So this is our normal grading on all of our gravel roads. Our goal is on the higher volume gravel roads, 100 vehicles or more, we try to grade them 3 times in the springtime. And the thought process behind that is your ruts and your potholes after winter, we can't blade through them. You'd have too much muck. Number one, our graders can't cut that deep anyway. So we do what's called a cut and fill. We knock the tops off and we fill the holes. And then we let the traffic drive on it to pack it in. And you will get some calls, hey, they were out here and I still got washboard or potholes. Well, yes, that's the idea, is you get that, then the next time we grade it, you get less, and by the third time, you hopefully have a good surface to drive on for the rest of the summer. Now that requires Mother Nature to give us some rain, because we need moisture for these roads to pack. So like last year, it was so dry, we got through our roads about one time, maybe 1.5, and it was just too dry to do any good. Gravel roads need moisture to pack. We rely on the vehicles similar to like a chip seal to pack the road. And so without moisture, it does us no good. It just stays fluffy, and those potholes and washboards come back right away. I've been asked, can we haul water? We would have to have a fleet of tanker trucks, and we'd have to pay these water districts a lot of money, because you need moisture in that first 2 to 3 inches. Is good to have the moisture in it. So even after a heavy, hard rain, it doesn't help us. The light rains that go on for a couple of days, that's what really helps us do our work. In the fall, we try to do that 2 times if we can. And that moisture helps us with the roads. I've been talking a lot about moisture, but it hurts us too. When you get moisture sitting on the roads and cars driving over it, that's what causes the potholes. We have summer roads out there that we grade maybe once a year, once every 3 years, and that kind of depends on the area. Down south, where they use them a lot for your farm, agricultural, hauling wheat and stuff, we try to grade those once a year. Up north, if it's a summer road that doesn't have any impacts on it, it's probably once every 3 years. And we kind of watch it. If there's a logging operation, then it might get once every year until that logging operation's done. Time frame for this grading, again, it's weather dependent, but we try to get that 6 week, hopefully is like a mid-March through mid-May type of time frame. We're supposed to get rain tonight and tomorrow, so we'll get out and grade. If it happens on the weekends, we will offer overtime to the crews to come in and grade. It's that important to us. In the summertime, you know, you guys will get lots of complaints about the washboard. There's not a whole lot we can do when it does rain. We get out there to show that we're doing something, but again, a lot of times if it's just one rain shower that moves through, there's not enough moisture, and that road will be in worse shape than it was before within a couple days. But we got to make an effort, and so we make our best effort. And really, if we could have a good rain storm for a week, rain showers for a week in the summer, that would be good to give us some time to grade these high volumes. It's usually the high volume gravel roads that get really rough. And then just a reminder, it's different from district to district. Usually our District 2, which is Spangle, and our District 3, which is the West Plains, they can start their grading work typically a week or 2 ahead of some of the roads up north. And even up north, there's still a few that have snow around them. So we do watch that and we adjust accordingly. Any questions on our gravel roads?
On the gravel roads and stuff, in terms of the spring, is there any merit at all to maybe considering some of these things to roll them after you grade them? They're compacted down as opposed to just letting the vehicle traffic compact it down?
I think there is, and one thing we're looking at, there's an attachment that goes on the back of the graders, and it's called a walk and roll. And we've got one coming this fall for us to try.
Okay.
To see if the benefit, cost benefit on it.
Right.
It's harder for the operators because it's a heavy thing hanging off the back of them.
Right.
Some counties swear by them, others don't. Jim and I have checked with Okanagan, they swear by theirs. Some of the other counties say, well, it's got limited use. So we thought we'd try it and see. We just don't have the people to put a roller behind every single one of them, but that would help because, we get it where we want it and pack it down. That's definitely better than waiting for the traffic and trying to educate the traffic to drive across the road, not always in the same tracks,
Track it down.
Yeah.
Then you got ruts and everything else.
And to slow down. I mean, traffic. So since I've been here, gravel roads, the 2 things that really destroy them is the amount of traffic and the speed of the traffic.
Yeah.
And I think speed is probably the most important. If you could get, after we graded, if you get people to drive about 25 miles an hour till they kind of get it packed down, that road's going to last a lot longer than somebody on our fresh gravel road going down it at the speed limit of 35 plus 10 or 20. or 30. So, yeah. Any other questions?
We have tried rollers behind, just running in tandem with graders. And it'll buy us, depending on everything, but it'll buy 3 to 4 weeks before it starts getting really bad in terms of washboard. It's just expensive.
Yeah.
Getting enough of them out there when we're running what, 24 graders?
No, 32 graders. Yeah.
So to have 32 rollers behind it, you can't get behind everything.
Double your workforce just to put a roller out there.
Right. Yeah.
And if you don't have the moisture, the roller is wasted time. Yeah.
And one thing that we have learned over time is the crown of our gravel roads is important. And the philosophy years ago was the flatter was good because they're afraid of people sliding off in the wintertime. But we've talked to some people, we're trying to hit that 5% crown now on these roads. Because usually it gets flattened out some as it's packed down. But again, if we can get that water to shed off once we get that top on, that's the key to everything. Because otherwise you get water sitting on the road, that's where your potholes will start, washboards will start right there. But you can't, if the road structure was built flat, you can't just overnight get it done.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So are you guys adding any material to the gravel roads, or you're just doing what's there?
So our re-gravel is, it's probably on like a 40-year cycle, and it's hard to say depending on the volume and stuff, because the higher volume, the quicker you need gravel. And it's expensive too. So right now, we basically have 2 districts each year that gets a re-gravel program, and it usually is for about 5 or 6 miles. Again, if you look at our whole, it's not a very robust program. In some of them, it's hard to say. I mean, we got some roads that's got great base. We just can't, they're running on a cobble. It's kind of rough, but it's not getting potholes and it's really staying there. But our operators really don't have, they got some marbles to kind of bring across it. And that's something Chad's asked, and I've been trying to find a good gauge. Do you need 1.5 inches? Do you need 3 inches? And every agency is a little bit different because it depends on their rock and how much clay's in their rock and the makeup of their gravel and stuff like that. So there's no real easy answer. I'm still trying to work towards it. But yeah, that's.
Okay, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry for that wishy-washy answer. But
No, it's all good.
the next.
Do we still run our, didn't we at one time operate our own crushing operation?
Not since I've been around.
Okay.
We used to have a pug mill for cold mix asphalt.
Maybe that's what I was thinking.
But
Yeah.
we've been always contracted that out.
Okay.
Yeah, we have about one crushing contract a year. So this year we'll be down in Rockford. Last year we were at the Dalton Pit, which is up by Deer Park. A year before we're out at Eaton. So we kind of, and the most important thing that we crush out of there is the chip rock. Right. And then it sounds funny, but your crushed rock is a byproduct of the chip rock. Right. So.
Okay, thank you.
The next page is, and it's not a very big map. I can send you the real map. It shows where we're going to continue the gravel road stabilization, where we're doing new gravel surfaces. And then this year we got a clean air grant for up in that northeast of Hilliard. And it does about, and we're talking lane miles here, so it does about 3/4 of a mile of roads to do from gravel to permanent surface. So that's Julia that runs along the North Spokane Freeway. And in that neighborhood, there's a small, I think it's Wiley's in there, a block or two. And then we're going to do St. Michael's, finish that up to the top. It was paved about 3/4 of the way up. In the gravel road stabilization, I like it. It's a good product, but if you look at it over a 20-year life cycle, it's comparable to a BST. BST is a lot more cost up front, less down the road. Gravel road stabilization, less cost up front, but then you've got the yearly maintenance. We tried 2 products, and this is not the report here. We tried basically 2 products, a Meg chloride with bentonite clay or more of an oil-based product. We found that we didn't like the oil-based product because if you got potholes in it, it wasn't very easy to fix. It made it kind of look like a paved road, but it wasn't, and we got lots of potholes in it. The bentonite with the mag, if we got a problem, we go out and grade it. If we have to, we put a little water on it, roll it, and it's just like it was. We got to remember they're gravel roads. Newkirk, I drive it quite a bit, and you'll drive it and it's like, gosh, it looks great. And then the next week it's got some imperfections in it and you think, geez, this isn't working, but you got to remember it's a gravel road and it's still functioning far better than a lot of our other ones. And it's got like 750 vehicles per day on it. So running through the rest of our springtime work, we have pothole patching to do. And one thing I want to hit there is in the winter time when the hot mix asphalt plants aren't open, we're using what's called a cold mix. And cold mix really only works for your deep holes. So we get a lot of complaints, hey, I've got potholes out here, and they are there, but if they're less than 2 inches, we won't probably put cold mix in them because that's going to come right out. Once the asphalt plants open up, then we go back, we start with our deepest holes first, but then we will get to those thinner potholes. And the asphalt plants opened up 2 weeks ago, last week. Yeah, so they've been open for a couple weeks now, and we're getting crews out doing that. And then drainage problems, just to kind of show you that upper right picture. If you look in the background, the backhoe's trying to clean the snow and ice out of the ditch because that's what happened. It just got plugged and couldn't drain the way it had to. So it finds its own way across the road. And that's just a Mother Nature thing. And we get out there, we'll put signs up and we'll make sure that they can get through. And then we might have to come back the next week and fix them. Dust oiling. The citizens pay for the dust oils. We have a process. They call the dust oil companies. They get a permit. That started about mid-April, but today was the first, next week is the first day that we start grading them. And so the district managers, they'll kind of organize, and we don't go out and grade everything the first day because the dust oil companies can't get there. So each district has about 7 grading routes. So a lot of times they'll pick 2 in their district and send them out. And then they'll wait a day or 2 and then send them out again. And that way they're not hitting all these dust oil companies with a whole bunch of dust oils that they can't get to. The sooner they get to it after we grade it, the better shape it is in and the more it's going to last. We do on an average of 675 of these. And people can usually buy 1, 2, or 3 times throughout the year. And then we cut it off. They can't do that 3rd shot or that 2nd shot after September 1 because we will be getting out there and regrading it if it needs to in the fall.
And so you coordinate with the residents.
The dust oil company does, and then the dust oil companies take out the permit with us, and that's who we coordinate with. And it's limited coordination. I mean, we send them back and say yes, it's okay to apply, and they've got like 3 to 5 days to get there. There are a few real steep roads that over the years we've worked with the dust oil company. So we'll say, hey, we're going to grade this on Tuesday morning, and then they'll try to shoot it Tuesday afternoon just because it's that steep of a road. But there's a handful of those throughout the county. Street cleaning, we've got 2 types. We've got the kickoff brooms that we use on the rural areas. And then we have our pickup brooms that we use in our curbed areas. Basically, the goal is once per year on the roads. Some of our arterials, though, it takes more than 1 pass, and sometimes we have to hit it a couple times. But yeah, that's our goal. And we usually start in your PM10 areas first. If each district has an area that's dust sensitive, that's where we will start this program. And in 2 of the districts that have the most residential streets, it takes them most of the summer to get through them. And that's pretty much all of our main spring activities. We just kind of touched a little bit on what we transition to in the summertime. We start looking at our permanent gravel, our paving, our overlay crew starts May 2nd. Chip seal this year, we're going to start on the 20th of June. Our crack seal crew's been running right now. But as I heard the presentation before, we tried to hire around 45 extra help. And I think we're sitting at 10 so far this year. And that's gonna have a huge impact on our work this year. We know we have a few college and high school coming, but last year we were at 21 and I'm hoping that we get there this year. And we even upped it $2 an hour, went from $15 to $17 an hour. We interviewed, as an example, we interviewed 3 last week, hired them, and then one of them didn't show up today. So I don't get it. I don't know. And when you asked him how, what's the problem? I have no clue why people don't want to work. Side note on that, yeah, culvert repair, and then, we're doing our brushing, shouldering, ditching, and a lot of times that's on our roads that we're gonna chip seal the following year. We try to get anything that gets chip sealed the year before, we try to get it all ready to go. And then the last 2 is I included the construction capital map in here just so you guys had it. And then the next one was our program that has our chip seals and overlays on it. And then the last slide was, thank you very much for letting us have this time. And do you guys have any questions?
So in the capital projects, it's very small, so I'm having difficulty reading it. But
we keep it that way.
I don't see Euclid Bridge on that.
Yeah, no, that'll be on the updated. The reason it wasn't on the original plan, we talked about this when we adopted, it wasn't funded yet. And the rules for that are we have to include the funded project. So yeah, it'll be on the next one. We're gonna have a update to this is one that was adopted late last year.
Okay.
The one that'll come out, I'm hoping in about 3 weeks, our annual construction plan. And I just did get a hold of course, this is BN. They promised me that by last Friday we get the final version of the contract back. Of course, it didn't happen. I'm hoping it'll happen any day.
If you don't get it today, let me know and I'll call Helen again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Johan is.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let me know. I'll get on it today then.
Yeah.
Good eyes.
And we're going to, Scott's asked us to come back and talk about the whole capital construction, maintenance construction, put that all on the map so everybody sees the traffic impacts and all of that. We'll be back in a month or so. Whenever Scott lets us back here.
The question I have is, I traveled Glen Rose quite a bit, between the valley and the South Hill. And the shoulders have, they're just huge ruts from winter driving. So it's like, you chip seal and then it's like, you've got a big rut that if someone goes just off the chip seal, and with bikers and runners and stuff, it happens. Do you guys work, on the shoulders for some of those?
We do, that's part of our shouldering and ditching program. I wish we could do a better job, but I will look at that. We try to hit some of these higher volume arterials is where it seems to happen. As we come back, and chip seal is not a good time, but if we ever do an overlay, that's when we're trying to widen them out now. And then we try to paint that line, if we have an 11-foot lane, keep that 11-foot lane and then try to get a foot or two outside. That way it protects that shoulder from that drop off. In the years past, we used to try to shoot about a foot wider with our chip seal. And it looks good that first year or two, but it's really only a thin and then it starts to break off. So we're really trying to shift our program to make sure that the chip seal stays where the good road is. And so I think you're seeing some of that on these, Venrose 10 years ago or 15 years ago really wasn't traveled as much as it is now. So we're seeing a lot of breakups on the edge. And we'll take a look at that. I've noticed a few up north too, like Elk Chatteroy is one of those that I think that the more truck volume and stuff, the more you get that. So I'd like to say we can get everywhere every summer, but no, we pick and choose where we can do the best impact.
And that's the north end of Glen Rose, right? It comes into the city or towards the city.
Yeah, as you pass the roundabout, as you're going north or south. Just, there's those couple of turns that just everyone's in, and it's like they're
holding the inside.
Pretty rutted.
Well, and then sometimes it seems like the more you widen them, the faster they, if you widen that corner, they seem to go faster, and I'm not sure where that balance is at. But yeah.
So you're suggesting it's a law of natural selection? That's no.
No, it's, yeah, but it is, people drive what you give them, you know, the wider the road, the faster they drive, the smoother the road, the faster they drive.
More radius, more they can cut.
Yeah. Anything else? Did I miss anything that you were really hoping to get? Okay.
That was helpful to just know what's happening. So as people call, it helps us.
And we've talked to Scott, hopefully we'll come back at the beginning of each of our different seasons and kind of share with you what's going on. And that way it helps you guys answer the questions too. So, thank you very much.
No, and I appreciate what you guys do, because I know we don't, there's not enough money to do everything we want to do. So I know you guys are working hard to make it work.
Thank you.
So.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for the water. Kate. Those are chairs, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I provided to the clerk and to Mr. Valencia the two documents that we'll be talking about today. And as we move forward, I will ask Mr. Valencia to place them on the overhead and also reference those to the board. For the record, I'm Jim Amacio. I'm a special deputy prosecuting attorney assigned to the Civil Department of the Prosecuting Attorney's Office. The purpose of my meeting this morning to the board is to update the board on some changes to the Open Public Meetings Act that are set forth in House Bill 1329, which was adopted in the 2021-22 legislative action. I have two documents that I'd like to talk about today. Firstly, I have prepared a matrix of the various changes to the OPMA law that were adopted by the legislature. And there were 13 particular sections, which I'll go over very briefly. And you'll see many of those are not action items for the board. They're just a reiteration of the present law or incorporation into the present law of various prior Attorney General's opinions. The second document, however, I have for the board is one which we are asking the board to give us some decisions on. And as the board is aware, under the OPMA, any public agency is now required to take oral and or written testimony on any final action on a regular meeting. So I'll talk about that, but before I get to that, I'd like to go over very briefly the items on the OPM summary document. Thank you, Mr. Valencia, for placing that on the overhead. As the board is aware, the OPMA was originally adopted in 1971-72. And since then, it's been subject to various Attorney General's opinions as well as court cases. And as we move forward with some of the 13 section changes, if you will, in the overhead document, I want to make it very clear that my statement of what it deals with is simply a reading of the particular section. I would expect that there will be some litigation or Attorney General's opinions that further explain these changes as we move along. So what I'm showing you in the first document is just a statement of the various changes to various elements of the OPMA. So if you look at the document now I've provided for you, a couple of interesting elements. Firstly, under the section number, I've identified the effective date of that particular section. And some of the sections are effective when the governor signed the bill on March 24th. Others are effective June 9th, which is 90 days after the end of the legislative session. And so each one of the sections, I've identified the effective date because it helps us as we move forward. Now, if board members, I'd like to very quickly, but maybe articulately, go through the document which you see on the overhead. And I'd like to start with section 1. And the interesting thing about section 1, board members, if you'll notice an action required, this is just no actions required on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners with regard to this section. It's just a finding and declaration of the purpose of the OPMA. and I'll let the board look at the summary of that just for a moment before we move forward. Madam Chair, moving to section 2, if we could. Section 2 is, even when not required by the law, public agencies are encouraged to incorporate and accept public comment during their decision-making process. And the interesting thing about this is, as we'll talk later on, the only time the board is required now by law, effective June 9th, to accept public comment is on final actions on your regular agendas. But what section 2 says here, even though you only have to take public comments on final actions, they're suggesting and encouraging us to consider taking public testimony on other than final actions. And as the board knows, the word action under the public disclosure law includes final action, a vote, discussions, considerations, reviews, and evaluations. So again, section 2, we're not required to take public action on anything, public comment on anything but final actions on our regular meeting agendas. Section 3, and again, this one, as you know, it's not an action item. It just says we're encouraged. And then there's section 3, they're suggesting that once we go back to normal OPMA, they're encouraging us to provide, in addition to in-person meetings, some virtual element of the meeting. And it's encouraged, you're not required to. So once the governor eliminates, well, right now, we can have you can't have in-person meetings, but under the governor's order, you've got to have a virtual element too. Once the governor pulls his emergency declaration, then we'll be back to only in-person meetings. And so what they're suggesting under 3 here is, we're encouraged, once the governor
Did you say when, or did you say if?
When?
When
I'm
sorry.
If he pulls that, then at that point in time.
Opportunistic statement. It doesn't mean it'll happen.
Yeah, but so right now, as we know, you have to have virtual, in-person or optional. But they're suggesting once the governor removes this action, Commissioner Kearns, then we're only going to be required to have in-person meetings. They're encouraging to continue with the virtual meetings. That's what section 3 is all about. Yes, Commissioner French.
Mr. Macio. So it says in the section 3, provide that all meetings in addition to being in person. No, that's not the one. Provide for comment at all meetings where there is no final action. Discussions can. So since we publish our agenda before the weekend, and are open to people providing written comments on anything that's on the agenda, does that satisfy that, or do we actually have to add a section into our hearings on Tuesday for the public to be able to comment on anything that's on the agenda before we take action on all of these items?
Commissioner French, that's the item we're going to talk about next, and it's on the second piece of paper that you have. And to your left, if you will, that's the decision matrix, which I'm going to ask the board to give me some direction on. If you'd like me to discuss that now, Madam Chair, I'm glad to. Whatever you'd like to do.
I can wait.
Okay.
I'll wait because I
But
enjoy the
Commissioner French,
anticipation.
your question is an excellent question. Okay, so if I could have you turn to
Jim,
page.
if I could, so does that mean, like, or earlier in our presentation today, when we discussed the fleet replacement for parks, would that be something that under this, it would be, as soon as that presentation was done, we would have said, is there anybody online that wishes to comment on it? For those types of items where we didn't take a vote, we actually said, could you go get us more information, report back? But is it that type of thing you mean would be open?
Well, let's.
to comment?
Well, but we did take a motion to authorize the grant.
That was a different, that was for Bear Lake. That was a different presentation.
No, I know, but I mean,
One.
should we required public testimony on our motion to authorize the filing of the grant before we voted on it?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, may I please ask Mr. Valencia to go to the second document that they
Oh,
gave
no,
me? a copy of,
okay,
because
no,
because
if
I
we're,
like-
if we're throwing you
No, no,
off.
you're not throwing me off.
You're,
This
Yeah,
is
let's
the,
no,
let you
you-
get through
yeah,
it first.
yeah.
I'd
and
like
then-
to go, okay, because this is the most important issue that I'm here for, is to get the direction from the board on this issue.
Because I
So,
think we're gonna have a lot of questions, but let's get. through
okay,
this
let's go there.
first, and
Okay,
then-
I'm on page 2 of 4 board, 2 of 4 board members. I'm at the top of page 2. We're talking about section 4. And again, this is not a requirement. We're encouraged, we're encouraged to make available to the public on YouTube or some other way, videos of our meetings. And my understanding, and Madam Clerk, can you please clarify this? My understanding is that all our meetings are placed on YouTube after the meeting for the public to look at. And under the law, you're not required to do this, you're encouraged to do this. And so the question here, Madam Chair, is going to be, I'm looking at the clerk, are these, like, is today's meeting being taped and put on YouTube? This meeting right now?
It will be uploaded.
Okay.
Later this week. Yes.
And again, under this particular provision, Mr. Valencia, we're not required to do it, we're encouraged to do it, and if we do it, they recommend that we leave it on the website for 6 months so people can view it. I don't know if we have that capabilities.
It stays on there forever.
Okay,
They don't time out, they're not deleted, they're not purged or anything like that.
so Madam Chair, section 4 again, there's no action on this item required because we're encouraged to do it, but we're already doing it. Section 5, board members, is really an attempt to put in place the same procedures that we operated under during the pandemic without the governor declaring any sort of an emergency. So under section 5, the Board of County Commissioners doesn't need to meet in person under certain circumstances. And the 2 conditions have to be satisfied before this occurs. Number 1, there must be a declaration of an emergency by a local body, a state body, or the federal government. That's the first thing. And 2, once that emergency takes place, if the Board of County Commissioners determines that they can't hold a public meeting with the public in attendance because it would jeopardize the safety of the public, you with me, you can meet virtually without the public in attendance, or you can meet with limited public being present. And if you do that, then you have to provide in your notice how the public can listen in virtually to the meeting. So in other words, board members, this change in the law puts into place what we're presently operating under the governor's order, allowing us to meet virtually without any members of the public present, or with some of the members of the public present, so long as they have the right to listen into what we're doing. That's the uniqueness of section 5. So it gives us that flexibility down the road. If I could have you turn to page 3 of 4 now, board members. Section 6. This is a change in the law. And right now, as the board is aware, we don't have the ability to require people to do anything as a conjunction of appearing at one of our meetings. They come in the room. The only time they have to do something right now is if it's a public hearing and they want to testify, we ask them to sign a sign-in sheet. The law has been changed now under section 6. And it sets forth circumstances under which the Board of County Commissioners can add conditions to attendance at a meeting. The best example is this. right? Previously, you had to wear a mask when you attended a meeting. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. When the public health might be jeopardized, you might require a mask, you might require distancing, if you will, at the meeting itself. So this is a change in the law. So for the first time, to protect the public health or protect against interruption of a meeting, you can require a condition. Now, when you say interruption of a meeting, you got to be careful about First Amendment rights. Commissioner French?
So Friday at the State Building Code Council meeting, as we were trying to get kicked off, we ended up getting Zoom bombed. And a couple kids were able to enter into the meeting, and they were cussing and swearing and just being, and so we ended up having to suspend the meeting while they figured out a way to exclude these kids from being able to interfere with the meeting. The question that I have is, does this second bullet here address our ability, or no, protect against interruption of the meeting? Does that give us the freedom to go in and exclude somebody from participating in the meeting because they are being disruptive or interfering with the conduct of the meeting?
Commissioner French, you ask a great question, and I don't know that I want to answer that question. Let me just go to number 7. Go to number 7 for a moment, if I could, Commissioner French. Right now, we know under number 7 that we can order the meeting room closed based upon disorderly conduct, or may adjourn and reconvene. We know we can do that right now. And Commissioner French, the Building Code Council could have done that on Friday. I don't know what you did.
But technically what they did is they went in and identified who the people were, and then just, I guess, blocked them out from being able to provide testimony. I'm not a geek, so I don't know technically how they did that.
It sounded like they had a normal Zoom format, like what we use here is webinar. So you have to be manually let in before you can participate. You can raise your hand and may sometimes chat, but it depends on it all depends on the format of Zoom you have.
Okay.
So we have to, the administrator of our Zoom meetings have to physically let people in.
Let somebody in. Okay.
Otherwise, they can only watch. If you're not let in, you can still see.
You
but
can watch and listen, but you
Yes,
can't
yeah. So
participate.
Commissioner, so here.
And I guess
8 panelists, and then we have 10 people in the audience watching.
All right.
So Commissioner French, your question is, Mr. Valencia indicated that the Building Code Council went in and they adjusted who could be speaking, if you will, so they wouldn't interrupt what's going on. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Valencia?
Yeah, essentially.
Okay. So under section 6, Commissioner French, the easiest way for me to explain that is masks and social distancing. Your question dealt with to protect against interruptions of meetings. And Commissioner French, you asked a good question. Mr. Valencia, what the Building Code Council did is clearly probably allowable under the new section 6, if you will. And of course, that was effective on March 24th, Madam Chair. A section 7, board members, this is an interesting one. Right now, sometimes people interrupt meetings by talking and not being recognized. And so what section 7 does, which is effective was immediately is, it gives the chair and the body the ability to stop people when they are speaking and they're not recognized. Now, this is Commissioner French and board, this is a close question because remember, people have First Amendment rights. You've advertised it as a public hearing, but they shouldn't be able to interrupt another speaker. They should wait till their turn, be recognized by the chair, and then make their presentation. Commissioner French?
So when we're taking public testimony in a hearing and we say you've got 3 minutes, at the end of 3 minutes, some people have a tendency to kind of wander off and take much more time. Could we, through the skill set of Mr. Valencia and Gina, say 3 minutes up and cut them off?
Commissioner French, you're talking about a public hearing now, not the other issue. Absolutely correctly, you can. You could have some sort of a clock that indicates like they do yellow, green, red. You could do that if you can find one. That's absolutely, you can do that. if you're going to do that, Commissioner French, we are going to recommend that the notice of public hearing that we send out, like it says now, you've got 3 minutes, but it can be adjusted by the chair.
Yeah, that way it gives the chair the ability to control the meeting and it prevents people from being disruptive and just wandering off forever.
Well, it's easier, Commissioner French, that's easier said than done, and it depends upon the chair and the entire board. And also notice to the public, so they very clear that they're going to be cut off after 3 minutes. So that's was number 7, board members, section 7. Section 8, Section 8 just provides mechanism for a remote meeting without a location in the event of an emergency discussed in section 5. So under section 5, there's a local emergency declared. The board is of the opinion that they don't want they don't want to hold an in-person meeting because it's too dangerous to the public. So they decide to have a remote meeting without the public involved. You can do that. A remote meeting without the public involved in the event of an emergency when you think their attendance would be detrimental to them. And so in that instance, they've got to be able to participate virtually by phone or visually. That's section 8 just authorizes that. Moving down the chart, board members, section 9, which is already effective. As we know right now, all agencies are required, public agencies are required to post their agendas of their meetings 24 hours in advance. But they provide some exceptions for smaller public entities. The legislature has made it more difficult now for a particular entity to not publish its notice on a website. So that's what section 9 is all about. You've got to, it's more difficult now. And what they've done in place of doing that, they've authorized smaller public entities to partner with larger public entities like Spokane County, where we would publish their agendas. We haven't been asked to that yet, but we may in the future. Section 10 and 11 board members are simply have to do with posting notices of special meeting, if you will, in instances where there's an emergency similar to what we've got right now. Right now, under the governor's proclamation, we do not need to post notices of special meetings on our website if we don't have one or on the door. So it just reaffirms that in the event we have future public meetings that are emergency meetings under our declaration. So it kind of leaves in place what we've presently got in the event this happens in the future and the governor doesn't declare an emergency. I'm moving through just a little bit quicker, board members, because I want to get to the second document. Again, section 11 deals with a posting of notices. Section 12, which becomes effective June 9th on page 404 of board members, we are already doing that. And under section 12, the legislature made it very clear that in the event the board holds an executive session during a public meeting, they've got to announce and put in the minutes the purpose of the public meeting. And so in this particular case, I think the chair or the person who's requested the public meeting indicates the purpose of the public meeting, if you will, in some instances, how long it's going to take and who's going to be present. But the way the law is written, you simply have to announce, make it very clear of the purpose of the public meeting. And I would recommend, to the extent at all possible, you not only use the terminology, for instance, executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment of personnel, but you cite the RCW if you can, and that should be the responsibility of the person who's requesting the public meeting. My understanding is, in talking to the clerk, we already do that, and she includes that in the minutes, which is the critical thing.
Yeah, we started doing that.
Now, the most important element I'm here for is section 13. If I could have Mr. Valencia put on the chart that has been prepared with regard to this item, and if I had the board, please look at the second document which I've given you. And the document is a 2-page document. The first page is Commissioner French. This is going to answer Mr. Kearns some of your questions. And then the second page, we've got a questionnaire which Mr. McLean and I would like the board's answer on. So under section 13 of House Bill 1329, the legislature for the first time is requiring all public agencies to take public comment on all final actions at a regular meeting. Let me read, they're all terms of art. So anytime the Board of County Commissioners hold a meeting and you're going to take final action on the item, and it's a regular meeting, you are required to take oral or written comments. Now, let me stop for a minute. I've defined the word final action on the chart under the first column. Final action only means you're going to vote on something in support of or in opposition to it. And remember, you hold, when you hold an open meeting, you can discuss things, review things, and so on and so forth. It's only when you take a final action that you're required to accept public comment on that particular item. So, final action. The next column talks about the various kinds of meetings that the board has, because as I indicated, the law provides that you take final actions at a regular meeting. And so the next question is, what the heck is a regular meeting? So I've got 4 items which I've indicated there, and I've had dialogue with MRSC and other attorneys throughout the state on this. So a regular meeting is a meeting which by resolution or ordinance, the board is set up on a regular basis. Your consent agendas, board members, are on Tuesday, they're regular meetings. Today's meeting is a regular meeting because in the county code I provided many years ago that you meet on Mondays and Tuesdays and you can take final action on everything. So right now, item number 2, daily calendar meetings are meetings. Number 3, a special meeting you are not required to take comments on. By its very nature, it's something you give a special notice of, 24 hours notice, but you're not required to take comments on any final action on a special meeting. Don't know why, but that's the way it's set up. And number 4, as the board knows, from time to time, we have an emergency meeting. An example, we got a terrible snowstorm. It's down south. The board needs to meet in the executive session to close roads. We don't give notice to anyone. We meet, we make a decision, and then we indicate what happened after the fact. So under that circumstance, we don't have to accept public comment on any final action item. Now, let's go to the third column. The law requires us to take public comment on any regular meeting, and the comment can be oral and or in writing. Oral and or in writing. You can either do one or the other or both. The law provides that if you limit it to written testimony, the written testimony must be submitted before the board's meeting, and the clerk then distributes that to the county commissioners. If you allow oral testimony, the law provides that you have to allow oral testimony before you take final action on that particular item at the particular meeting. The law provides that if you have someone who cannot attend a meeting, they're disabled, or it's hard for them to personally appear at a meeting. My car broke down. The bus isn't working. if they advise you in advance that they're unable to appear in person, and it's all possible, you have to afford them the ability to provide verbal comments, if you will, via a virtual opportunity. So before I move forward for the questions, this chart is, I made it so it's really easy to understand because it takes a while to understand it. So effective June 9th, the county commissioners and all your daily calendar meetings and your consent agenda, when you take final action, are going to have to allow comments from members of the public orally or in writing on that action, on that item before you take action on it. Chairman Cuny, do you have any, if I made it complex, I'm trying to make it simple. Have I made it difficult?
Well, no, I mean, I think I understand that we're gonna have to do that, but it's gonna be, so like Commissioner French said, so our resolution, the motion that we just passed today is final action, correct?
That is correct. Well,
So,
here's one.
On the grant for parks. So in the future, after January 9th, do I need to start to allow for public testimony then?
Okay,
And-
you
and
asked a
part-
good.
Part of the problem is the public doesn't even understand that we're gonna, and we didn't understand until we presented during the meeting that we need to take an action.
Right now, board members, as you know, the county, when you publish your daily calendar, advises that you can take action to include final action on any item on the calendar. So that's the way it reads right now, Commissioner Cuny. And so you don't need to take public testimony as we speak. One way to address your concern is to provide, well, depends what you want to do. If you want to limit public comment, if you will, to oral testimony, if you could simply do that if you wanted to. And so people would have to, if you will, zoom in, or they'd have to appear in person. That's option one. And if you did that, then you couldn't take testimony if someone, well, you could take it. They have to appear at the meeting, wouldn't they?
But is all she would have had to do though is Al made a motion, I seconded it, and then would Mary just say, okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there anybody on Zoom with us who would like to testify? Please raise your hand. If nobody does, then
So long
okay,
as-
if there's no one here, then we vote and we're.
So long as it's
Is that
on the
it?
agenda and people know about it. One of
Oh.
our problems is,
Okay,
if it's not on the agenda, then people
They
don't
don't
know.
know.
So one of the options is for us to stop advertising that you can take final action on your daily calendar. That would mean, Commissioner Kearns, that you couldn't approve what Commissioner French just brought up and made a motion on. You couldn't do that. It's not on the calendar.
2 o'clock consent agenda.
Exactly.
So basically, it would limit us from taking any action unless it's on our 2 o'clock consent agenda. And then we've got to provide for an opportunity for testimony, either written or oral during the meeting.
That is correct. Let me give you an example, Commissioner Cuny. Let's talk about your 2 o'clock consent agenda.
maybe.
Go ahead.
So I'll give credit to Ron. It was his, so on our weekly agenda, under each of the, like, when you look at our 9 AM strategic planning meeting, it's, Tori Peterson, juvenile court. Could take final action, or Doug Chase, community parks, level of service presentation, could take final action.
Look at
I
the
mean, could
top
we
of
put
the
something like-
document. Look at the top of that document. It already says that, Commissioner
Okay.
Kearns.
But, so does that suffice then,
Well,
if it's already there?
it's difficult for people when you say miscellaneous to know what you're talking about, to take final action on.
Okay,
But it has-
but like Bear Lake Regional Park update, phase 1 shoreline renovation project, I mean, that's
could
not
take-
miscellaneous, that's very specific, what it is. It
But it
says we
wasn't
could
saying-
take final action, I mean, would this have been sufficient today then?
I would have probably added to the caption, Commissioner Kearns, that the board will accept public comment on any item that they take final action on before you take action on it. If you want to take oral testimony.
Why could we take written testimony?
If you take written testimony, Commissioner French, the issue that I would draw to your attention is this. Gina publishes the agenda on or before Friday at 5 o'clock. If people get the document, they'd have to submit their written comments by Monday at 1 or 2, and some people might not look at it till then. So, and that's your question, Commissioner French, we would have to put in the notice, if you're going to submit written testimony, it has to be submitted to the clerk on or before a certain time. We could do that, Commissioner French. We'd put it right in the notice of our daily calendar.
But then would we have also had to put, if it was just written, would we have then also had to have somehow had that PowerPoint presentation also published with our weekly count, so they actually know what it is that we're doing? I mean, yeah, otherwise it's just Bear Lake project phase 1. If that's not a heck of a lot to go on for most people.
Commissioner Kearns, if you look at the law, it just simply says, before you take final action on an item listed on the agenda. When you list an item on the agenda, you don't necessarily have to have a link to it. It makes sense to do that because that gives full transparency to the members of the public so that their comments can be relevant. So I wouldn't, yes, it makes more sense. If they don't see it, it makes it problematic. But from a technical perspective, if you've identified the item, then you could take final action on it, but you'd have to accept their oral comments before you took final action.
I see an issue with that mainly if it's a 2 p.m. consent agenda, that's totally different because you pull that up, you can click a link and you can read the resolution. You understand what it is we're voting on. But with something like that Bear Lake presentation today, there was no resolution out there. I mean, essentially all the information was a PowerPoint presentation that we got today that, you know, what was emailed to us, but it wasn't out, you know, on our website accessible. So I mean, I think the written comment works for a 2 p.m. consent agenda. I think that worked, but the oral I think would have to be for like what we did this morning.
Well, Commissioner Kearns, let's address the 2 p.m. consent agenda. You could provide, you're only going to accept written comments on the published agenda received by, let's say, Monday at noon, if you will. And then they'd have to go to Gina. Gina would print them out and provide them to the board. Let's say Commissioner French said there's a crisis here. We've got to take action on a particular item. Mr. Simmons says, I'd like to bring it on by leave. You could bring it on by leave, but you'd have to provide in the notice that if you brought anything on by leave after the public agenda, you'd have to accept oral testimony on that item. So there is a way, board members, to address last minute items on the consent agenda if you wanted to. And Mr. McLean and I would draft the document to address that circumstance. But getting back to your first question, Commissioner Kearns, and I've seen Mr. Simmons has been very clear now when he has items on your daily calendar to articulate in much more detail the items that we're going to take action on, so the public know when they want to conference in and listen to that presentation. And your suggestion is, well, Mr. Amacio, if we want to take final action on that item, to be transparent with the public, we need to provide them with the exact document we're going to see. So if they want to submit written comments or oral, they know what it's all about. And I think that's what I'm hearing you suggest. It's problematic when it's just listed on the agenda with no link.
Well, I'm thinking like this morning, probably the easiest thing we would have taken oral comment on this morning's like we would with a by leave. And that'd probably be the simplest way around that. But written, I could see making sense for our 2 p.m. consent agenda because all of that information is put out, you know, Thursday or Friday. And so, I mean, they have that time, you can click a link, you can read the resolutions, you can read everything. You can actually understand what it is we're doing there. So
Commissioner Kearns, if I could have Mr. Valencia turn to page 2 on the chart. So all the questions the board is asking are questions that Mr. McLean and I want the board to give us direction on. So, question number one, board members, the board can accept comments in writing and or orally. What's your preference? And I'm talking about daily calendar items, board members, versus, if you will, consent agenda, if that's what you want to do. Because Mr. McLean and I need to take the present county resolution that's been published and modify it consistent with your request. So I don't know if you're ready to make a decision on it today. You want to think about it, but Commissioner CUNY, I need to know consent agenda, is it oral and or written with a date certain when they have to submit it, with the concept that if you add something by leave, you'll allow oral on that. That's what I would do for the consent agenda, if that's what you want. Do I have any direction?
Written with the deadline at noon on Monday.
For consent.
Yeah.
And may I inquire of the clerk, Madam Clerk, if we adopt a resolution that provides that the agenda will be published by Friday at 5, then, and we provide that any written comments have to be received by the clerk by Monday at noon, and then you would be able to print them off and give them to the board members by Tuesday at 2. Is that going to work with you?
We need them before Tuesday,
I'm sorry.
because we need to have read them prior to the consent.
Okay, so if it's noon on Monday, then she would make them available to the board as soon as, and right after Monday at noon. And is it also, and then I'm also hearing that if the board wants to add any items by leave, once the agenda is published, that oral testimony would be accepted on that item before action is.
Yep.
Okay. And item number 2, we've already established the time frame for written comments on the consent agenda. What about I call it the daily calendar, board members, and I want to call that the strategic planning meeting, if you will, that we have Mondays, or the other item we can have Tuesday mornings. What's the board's direction on that? One thing is not to take final action on everything. We say no final action will be taken on any items on this agenda. And if you did that, you don't have to take testimony. So if I'd advertised that, saying you'll take action, not including final action, you wouldn't have to take comments in writing or orally. But it limits your ability to act on Mondays.
Yeah, because the thing, when I first heard about this bill passing, I was thinking, some of the, I mean, I guess you could say quote unquote little things we do, like where someone says, can we get, a letter of support for another entity or an outside agency that's applying for some sort of grant. We make motions that, we'll write a letter of support. I mean, and sometimes it's, it's like, oh, they need this by the end of the day to submit their, and unfortunately, sometimes that's sort of their fault for not letting us know in a timely manner that they need the letter. But, it's like, I mean, that really blocks us from some of that stuff.
In that situation, when we've asked to write a letter, I mean, the only other way to get around that is to say, okay, we've got a motion on the floor to write a letter and then take oral testimony.
If anyone is listening.
If anybody is listening, otherwise we're gonna, I mean, we're contributing to the expansion of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And do I have to give 3 rounds of, does anyone want to, just like in a public hearing, or do I just say, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to provide public testimony?
Madam Chair, I think that's up to the chairperson, how he or she wants to handle it. And you just simply, this is open public comment period. You can ask once or twice, however you want to do it. It's not like if you were Robert's Rules of Order, where I think we've all said, once, twice, okay.
Right.
So that's probably the safest way to do it, right? I mean, just
nothing wrong with
call
that.
for it 3 times. If there's no one there, then take a vote.
But then I think we've got to identify too, because there's times where it's like, do we just do a head nod versus a formal motion? I mean, and so it's been, you know, there's times.
Head nods, a consensus in my view is an action. I've always taken that as an action, and I've directed the clerk to consensus, you approve something. And I think, I think you're gonna have to make a motion on that kind of stuff.
So I'm gonna check.
We've got a
because-
hard stop at noon.
Do you have a hard stop at noon?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jim, we may need to take this up next week.
Okay, that's fine, board members.
I mean,
We have some
till
time.
June 9th,
Okay,
right? So let's add this to the agenda for next week to have us kind of think through it and revisit it.
good. That'd be fine, Madam Chair, and I think that the chart I've given you is food for thought. And I've got some direction from the board. We have until June 9th to address this issue, so we have some time for the board to give legal counsel some direction. And if you have any individual questions, please feel free to give me or Mark a call, and we'll be glad to answer them.
I'm gonna see if, I'm gonna just let you quickly, I know we've got Arian, but can you just quickly go through the miscellaneous items?
Yeah,
Because I-
we can actually, both of Arians, if you would like, we could take those separately as part of the consent agenda and do a quick brief before them, because they're both on the consent agenda tomorrow. If you'd like, or I could touch them right now, it's up to you.
Right, or we can just read through what those are.
Yeah, the one is just a reminder that the homeward bound resolution for VOA is on the consent agenda tomorrow. We've talked about that on multiple occasions.
Okay.
And then there's an amendment to the ARP resolution that we delayed off of last week. We needed to make one more minor change on there administratively, moving one bucket to another. The net dollars are the same. It's just grouping our admin costs into one bucket.
Okay, and we do have a copy of that in front of us,
Yep,
so
you do.
if you have, if there's any issues, we can take it separately, or it can just be, if it's okay with it, take it on the consent.
And I believe I can move that other one to tomorrow. Arian, do you see any issues with me moving that grant request for the resettlement from Coppers to tomorrow?
Yes, that would be great, because I don't have it
Okay.
quite prepared yet.
So we can do it tomorrow.
We just breezed through yours, so you don't have to do
Okay, I was
anything.
waiting.
No, we're just behind, so.
We've
we're-
gone
let's
long.
stop.
We're done with you.
It's our, it's our
I'll
fault.
be back in my second office right here, so.
Thanks, Arian. And I think we're proclamation request for Megan to all.
Yeah, I think that's just a request because it's May is Historic Preservation Month, so
We do that every year.
Yep.
Okay, so then that takes us to Steve for pending and potential litigation. We don't have the RCW attached to that today.
Weekly calendar.
I think that's all of them, so it's like,
That's
so.
Commissioners, I think you're looking for 4230, 110, 1I.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
So we're going to go into executive session for how long?
Well, he's got a hard stop at noon, so 10 minutes.
So 10 minutes? Okay. So Ashley, if you don't, can we do Ashley's tomorrow?
Ashley, can we do yours tomorrow?
Yes, we can move it to tomorrow.
We'll move that to
Great answer.
tomorrow. And when we come out of executive session, we will be adjourning for the day and reconvening tomorrow at 2 o'clock. In the executive session will be all three commissioners, our executive management team, Steve Bartel, our risk manager, and Mark McLean, our civil attorney. Okay, so, and we do not anticipate taking any action once we come out. So thank you all very much. We will adjourn and see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock.